Before we embark on this captivating journey into the heart of innovation and human connection, consider subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications. Every story we share is meticulously crafted to touch your soul and provoke thought, and you wouldn't want to miss a single chapter of discovery. Now, dim the lights, find your most comfortable seat, and let's dive into a world where a janitor's quiet genius, a CEO's unexpected transformation, and a daughter's unwavering belief rewrite the very blueprint of success and family, challenging everything we thought we knew about brilliance and belonging. The air in the Mercer Dynamics boardroom was thick, not with the usual optimistic hum of innovation or the crisp, invigorating scent of ambition, but with the cloying, metallic tang of stale, burnt coffee and escalating, palpable stress. It clung to the plush, ergonomic chairs, permeated the expensive, perfectly tailored suits of the engineers, and seemed to amplify the brittle silence that followed Sloan Mercer's voice. Her words, delivered with the surgical precision of a seasoned CEO accustomed to dissecting problems and executing swift, decisive action, sliced through the room like ice against glass, cutting through the last, fragile vestiges of feigned composure. 3 days, Sloan articulated, each syllable a hammer blow. 17 people, 6 emergency meetings, $500,000 in consulting fees, and what do we have to show for it? A mess on a screen. Her tone was a flat, dangerous monotone, devoid of inflection yet saturated with an unmistakable fury that radiated outward, silencing any potential for dissent or excuse. No one dared answer. The rows of engineers, assembled from the elite ranks of Silicon Valley's finest minds, sat in rigid, uncomfortable silence, their faces illuminated by the eerie, unforgiving glow of the massive LED display dominating the far wall. Beads of sweat, tiny, traitorous betrayals of their internal turmoil, gathered at their collars, their meticulously tied ties suddenly feeling like nooses, tightening with each passing second of her unforgiving gaze. The screen itself was a brutal, uncompromising tableau of failure, charts bleeding aggressive red lines of code, cascading downward like a digital disaster, a testament to a problem that defied their collective brilliance, their advanced degrees, their years of experience. The eye's predictive models, the very core of their multi-phase, multi-million-dollar contractor project poised to redefine autonomous response systems globally were overfitting, lagging, and fundamentally failing to generalize across critical data sets. The entire initiative, once hailed as Mercer Dynamics' next frontier, was on the brink of catastrophic collapse, threatening not only the company's financial stability, but also Sloan Mercer's impeccable, almost legendary reputation as a titan of the tech industry. "You have 5 minutes," Sloan declared, her voice still devoid of warmth, a cold, hard diamond cutting through the tension with lethal efficiency. "I want a solution, not another apology. Find it, or this entire division is restructured, effective immediately. And believe me," she added, her eyes flashing with a glacial fire, "you do not want to see what restructured looks like under my directive." Her custom-made, gleaming heels clicked once on the polished tile floor, a sharp, definitive sound like a single, final gavel strike before she turned on her heel with abrupt grace and strode out. The heavy, sound-dampening door, engineered to seal in the cacophony of ambition, whispered shut behind her, sealing in the despair, leaving behind only the stale scent of burnt coffee, collective stress, and the suffocating weight of unmitigated failure. Outside the panoramic, floor-to-ceiling glass wall of the boardroom, a figure moved with a practiced, almost invisible efficiency, a silent guardian of the corporate night. Gavin Brooks, 36 years old, a single father, and the night shift janitor for Mercer Dynamics, bent over with an unassuming grace to pick up a discarded, spilled soda can that glistened an unnatural, sticky red against the pristine white floor. He was clad in a faded grey uniform, the fabric softened and thinned by countless washes, an anonymous garment of humble service. Cheap earbuds, one dangling idly against his shoulder, the other tucked securely into his ear, played a podcast about ancient philosophy specifically. The stoic principles of resilience and perspective, a stark, almost ironic contrast to the high-tech, high-stakes world that pulsed around him. But his eyes weren't focused on the trash, nor were they dulled by the repetitive monotony of his duties. They were fixed, with an intensity that belied his humble occupation, on the massive LED board still glowing within the now empty boardroom. The complex AI formulas, the mangled logic loops, the cascading error charts still glared back from the screen, an impenetrable riddle waiting to be solved, a puzzle that had defeated minds infinitely more privileged than his. What no one in Mercer Dynamics knew, what no one, except perhaps a few dusty old professors from the hallowed halls of MIT, far across the country, remembered was that Gavin Brooks once studied advanced AI at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He was, in fact, not just a student, but at the very top of his class, a prodigy whose intuitive grasp of complex systems and abstract logic bordered on genuine genius. His thesis advisor, a renowned figure in the burgeoning field of artificial intelligence, had called him the next big thing, a mind capable of seeing patterns and connections where others saw only chaos and insurmountable data. He was on the fast track, earmarked for a glittering career, destined to lead the very tech industry he now quietly cleaned. But life, with its brutal, unannounced interventions, had a cruel sense of timing. It handed him something infinitely tougher than any theoretical exam or coding challenge: a daughter, Lena, born with eyes that mirrored his own deep intelligence, and a sudden, devastating funeral for the woman he loved, Lena's mother, who had been taken too soon by a relentless illness. The promises of a brilliant academic career, the glittering allure of Silicon Valley startups, the boundless potential of his intellect, had all vanished overnight, replaced by the stark, immediate, and overwhelming needs of survival. His days were filled with the quiet, urgent rhythms of single parenthood, late-night shifts scrubbing floors, early morning feedings, school runs, and the constant, gnawing anxiety of making ends meet. He became a ghost in the machine, a silent observer in the very world he was once destined to lead, his genius carefully hidden beneath a uniform and a mop. Inside the boardroom, the lights still glowed with a harsh, uncompromising brilliance, casting long, stark shadows. The last desperate team of engineers, their faces pale, drawn, and utterly defeated, had finally packed up their tablets and retreated in a dispirited huddle, their hopes and careers crushed under the unyielding weight of Sloan Mercer's expectation. Gavin, having completed his meticulous circuit of the executive floor, his duties temporarily suspended by an internal drive, stepped into the quiet sanctity of the room. The heavy door, still slightly ajar, swung shut softly behind him, sealing him in with the remnants of their failure. He set his mop and bucket to the side, a silent sentinel against the gleaming wall, its humble presence a stark contrast to the technological marvels that surrounded him. The whiteboard, a vast expanse of white polymer, stretched across the wall like a desolate battlefield, still littered with a debris of intellectual warfare, complex equations, mangled logic loops, and twisted predictive models, each line screaming its failure. He reached for a dry rag, his intention to simply wipe it clean, to erase the day's bitter failures, to restore the pristine order. But his hand stopped mid-air, hovering just inches from the chaotic scribbles. "Wait a second," he muttered, his voice a low, almost imperceptible whisper in the silent, empty room. His eyes narrowed, a familiar spark igniting behind them, that old MIT fire rekindling, burning with a quiet intensity. He tilted his head, a gesture of deep, almost spiritual concentration, as if trying to hear the silent, logical language of the code, to discern its hidden flaws. Something in the math, something in the fundamental assumptions underpinning the entire system, was glaringly, profoundly wrong. Not academically, not in the strictly theoretical sense that a junior engineer might miss a syntax error or a subtle logical fallacy, but intuitively. A profound, fundamental misstep that resonated with a deeper, more organic understanding of how intelligence, even artificial, should behave, how it should learn, how it should adapt. "They're using a linear model on nonlinear behavior," he murmured, the words echoing the ghost of a lecture he once gave in a brightly lit auditorium, a lifetime ago. Rookie mistake, a fundamental misunderstanding of complexity. Dangerous in the wrong hands, especially when scaled to this magnitude. He looked around, found a red marker left abandoned on the table, a stark, almost aggressive slash of color against the pristine white polymer. With a deliberation born of deep, unshakable understanding, a confidence that transcended his current station, he carefully erased a problematic segment of code, wiping away the flawed logic with a surgeon's precision. Then, with swift, confident, almost artistic strokes, he drew a graceful sigmoid curve, a fluid, elegant solution that transformed chaos into order. He circled two swapped variables, fundamental errors that had gone unnoticed by dozens of highly paid experts, their eyes blinded by their own assumptions. He underlined a misweighted node, a subtle imbalance that had sent the entire system spiraling into erratic, unpredictable behavior. Then he stepped back, crossed his arms over his chest, and nodded to himself, a silent, satisfied acknowledgement of profound clarity. "They've been looking at it backwards," he murmured, a profound truth delivered to an empty room. A quiet victory in the silent temple of corporate power. "And you think you've got it right?" The voice behind him was calm, unnervingly so. cutting through the profound silence like a razor's edge. It was laced with an unmistakable thread of iron, a quiet power that commanded immediate, absolute attention. Gavin spun around, his heart leaping into his throat, a sudden, primal surge of adrenaline. Standing at the doorway, her presence filling the already imposing room with an almost physical force, was Sloane Mercer herself. She was a vision of ruthless efficiency. Dark, impeccably tailored suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a sharp, unforgiving bun, eyes that measured everything and everyone with a cold, precise calculation of a high-stakes algorithm. She was a woman who saw only data, only efficiency, only results. She was, quite literally, the coldest CEO in tech, a force of nature in a corporate jungle, and she was looking directly at him, her gaze penetrating, utterly unreadable. I wasn't trying to mess with anything, Gavin stammered, caught completely off guard, a flash of his old insecurities, his new humility, overriding his intellectual confidence. I just noticed something off, something that felt intuitively wrong. I was just trying to clean the board. So, Sloane began, her voice still unnervingly level, a dangerous, predatory calm. You're sweeping floors and, in your off hours, you're casually correcting a $100 million algorithm that 20 of our most expensive engineers couldn't fix. Her tone was flat, accusatory, yet Gavin, with his heightened sensitivity to nuance, detected a faint tremor, a hint of something beyond mere anger, perhaps curiosity, perhaps even a reluctant flicker of admiration, deeply buried. Not correcting, Gavin replied, his voice regaining its steady cadence, his intellectual confidence reasserting itself despite the incongruity of his uniform. Just reframing. It's like switching from a dull knife to a sharp one. Same job, same task, but with less pain, more efficiency. It's about seeing the fundamental assumption, not just the symptoms. Sloane took a slow, deliberate step forward, her gaze unwavering, her eyes scanning the whiteboard, absorbing the changes he had made. The elegant sigmoid curve, the precisely circled variables, the subtly underlined note, a cascade of simple, yet profoundly impactful, corrections. Without a single word, her movements swift and fluid, she pulled a sleek, bespoke tablet from the inner pocket of her coat, its surface gleaming under the harsh lights. Her fingers moved with blinding speed, a blur of motion, inputting his changes, running a quick simulation using the revised logic Gavin had so casually scribbled. 8 seconds passed. Then 18. The silence in the room stretched, taut and expectant, broken only by the faint whir of the tablet. 18.4% increase in accuracy, she said flatly, her voice devoid of overt emotion, yet the words hung in the air like a thunderclap, echoing with undeniable significance. Error reduction by over 60%. These are unprecedented metrics. She turned to him for the first time, truly looking at him, stripping away the janitor's uniform, seeing beyond the mop and bucket, beyond the dirt and the labels. Her gaze, usually so detached and analytical, held a new intensity, a probing curiosity that bordered on fascination. She read aloud from the tablet, a clinical recitation of his sparse, publicly available profile. Name, Gavin Brooks. Position, night janitor. 3 shifts a week. Last formal education, MIT, left junior year. She paused, then continued, her voice lower, softer, reading a detail that was clearly from an internal HR note, a more personal detail she had clearly sought out. My wife passed away, needed to raise my daughter. A long pause. The silence stretched again, filled with the unspoken weight of his past, the sacrifices he had made. Do you understand what you've done? She finally asked, her voice a fraction less icy, betraying a flicker of something akin to awe, to recognition of a genius she had not anticipated. I didn't mean to step on anyone's toes, Gavin replied, a shrug in his voice, still reeling from the surreal encounter, the sudden, unwanted spotlight. I just saw something everyone else missed. It was just obvious to me. Sounds like a fortune cookie, Sloane murmured, a faint, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of her lips, a hint of dry amusement. Or like this, Gavin countered, emboldened by her unexpected response, by the fleeting glimpse of humor. If the bathtub's clogged, you don't pour in more hot water and hope it magically clears. You try unclogging the drain. That's how real problems get solved, at their source, not by superficial solutions. Sloane cracked a half smile then, a brief, fleeting curve of her lips that was not quite warmth, but something undeniably human, a subtle crack in her formidable facade. It was a glimpse into a hidden part of her, a moment of uncharacteristic vulnerability. Be in conference room C tomorrow, 8 o'clock am. She instructed, her voice regaining its crisp authority, yet now tinged with an unfamiliar note of genuine interest. "You'll be on the observer list. You will provide input." "I don't need to be in a meeting," Gavin began, a flash of his old reluctance to engage in the corporate hierarchy, to step back into a world that had once rejected him. "I'm just a janitor, Miss Mercer. I have my responsibilities." "That wasn't a suggestion, Mr. Brooks," Sloane cut him off, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "That was an instruction. Be there. On time." "What about my daughter?" Gavin asked, a practical concern immediately surfacing, the priority that always anchored him. "She'll have snacks and zoo tickets if necessary, arranged through my assistant. She will be taken care of. Your responsibilities are now here." Sloane paused at the doorway, her hand on the cold steel, then glanced over her shoulder, her gaze lingering on him. For the first time, her analytical eyes softened, not by much, not by any dramatic measure, but enough for Gavin to notice, enough for a brief, almost tender acknowledgement. "She doesn't need much," Sloane murmured, her voice a little distant, reflective, as if speaking to herself. "Just one reason to believe her dad is worth being proud of. After tonight, Mr. Brooks," she added, her gaze meeting his, "she just might have one." And with that, she disappeared down the hallway, her clicking heels fading into the sterile quiet, leaving Gavin alone in the vast boardroom, forever changed. Gavin stood there for a long moment, utterly stunned, the silence of the boardroom suddenly heavy with the weight of an unexpected, unimaginable future. He looked up at the red scribbles on the whiteboard, the elegant curve he had drawn, the evidence of his undeniable impact. Then he turned to his trusty mop in the corner, its worn bristles a silent witness to the night's extraordinary events. "Guess I owe you a raise, old friend," he muttered, a faint, incredulous grin spreading across his face, a mix of disbelief and dawning hope. His world, once predictable, quiet, and carefully contained, had just been irrevocably altered by a spilled soda can, a moment of forgotten genius, and the piercing gaze of the coldest CEO in tech. He had walked into a room to clean up a mess, and instead, he had cleaned up a billion-dollar failure, all while thinking no one was watching. But Sloane Mercer had been watching, and what she did next would rewrite all their stories forever. The silent ghost in the machine had just found his voice, and the CEO, frozen in her ivory tower, had just found a new kind of heat. Gavin Brooks didn't sleep much that night. Not because of nerves, though a tremor of apprehension certainly ran through him, nor solely from excitement, though an unfamiliar spark of exhilaration definitely flickered within. He didn't sleep much because Lena, his 6-year-old daughter, a bright-eyed and perpetually curious force of nature, absolutely refused to go to bed until he told her the entire story. Every single detail. He sat on the edge of her small bed, the soft glow of her unicorn nightlight casting fantastical shadows on the wall, patiently recounting the impossible events. "So, she just walked in," Lena whispered, her voice hushed with awe, her eyes wide as saucers. "And you weren't scared?" Her small hand reached out, tugging gently at the sleeve of his faded t-shirt, seeking reassurance. Gavin chuckled softly, brushing a wisp of her soft, brown hair behind her ear. He looked into her innocent, trusting eyes, and a profound calm settled over him, the kind that only comes from weathering true storms. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble, "when you've held your wife's hand in a hospital bed and told your 3-year-old daughter that she can't ask for her mommy anymore, that she's gone forever." His voice trailed off, a familiar ache, dull but persistent, resonating in his chest. "COs," he finished, a wry, almost dismissive tone in his voice. "They don't scare you anymore. Not really." Lena blinked, absorbing his words with a surprising gravity for her age. Then she smiled, a knowing, almost ancient smile, not a childish grin, but the kind that said, "I see you, Dad. I understand a piece of your pain, and I know your strength." She leaned in close, her breath warm against his ear, and whispered, "I think she likes you." Gavin chuckled again, a deep, resonant sound, a mix of amusement and a strange, unfamiliar warmth that had nothing to do with fear. He tucked her in, pulling the soft blanket up to her chin, kissed her forehead, and lingered for a moment, absorbing the simple, profound comfort of her presence. Then he left her room, the quiet solace of her sleep a stark contrast to the tumultuous thoughts churning in his mind. He stared at the ceiling of his tiny apartment for a long, long time, the weight of a sudden, unimaginable future pressing down on him. By 7:50 a.m. the next morning, a mere 10 minutes before the scheduled start, Gavin found himself standing outside conference room C at Mercer Dynamics. He was wearing the cleanest button-down shirt he owned, a faded blue, carefully ironed, though a faint coffee stain near the hem stubbornly resisted removal, a small emblem of his everyday life. His old satchel, a worn canvas bag that had carried countless textbooks and now held Lena's school lunches, was slung over one shoulder. Inside, amidst the remnants of Lena's breakfast, were a small notepad, a mechanical pencil, and a carefully folded drawing. Lena, with her unerring artistic vision, had made him a new picture, a stick figure, unmistakably him, holding a mop in one hand and a lightning bolt in the other, symbolizing his hidden power. The caption, scrawled in her earnest child's hand, simply read, "Daddy, my hero." It was a tangible piece of home, a quiet source of courage. Inside the glass-walled conference room, the usual morning buzz of activity was amplified, a nervous energy crackling in the air. Suits, expensive and impeccably tailored, buzzed around a central screen like moths to a flame, their voices a low murmur of anticipation and tension. Diagrams, complex and intricate, lit up the wall, illuminating charts, data points, and projected timelines. The air smelled of stress, ambition, and the cloying sweetness of peppermint breath mints a corporate cocktail of pressure. And then she walked in. Sloane Mercer. This time, Gavin saw her before she spoke, sensing her presence before she even crossed the threshold. The room instantly shifted, a palpable drop in temperature, not in degrees, but in demeanor. People stood straighter, their shoulders squaring, their voices lowering to respectful whispers. The temperature, metaphorically, dropped 2 degrees, an instinctive reaction to her formidable presence. She glanced at him once, a short, deliberate look that held no particular warmth, but a keen, almost imperceptible assessment, a silent acknowledgement of his presence. Then, with a single, authoritative gesture, she pointed to an empty chair near the edge of the long, polished conference table. "That's your seat, Mr. Brooks." He didn't ask permission. He didn't hesitate. He just walked over and sat down, Lena's drawing a reassuring weight in his satchel. "Let's begin," Sloane said, her voice snapping the room into sharp focus, cutting through the last whispers of nervous energy. Her gaze swept over the gathered executives and engineers, a silent demand for their full attention. "Yesterday, we witnessed a profound miscalculation, one that nearly cost us a multi-phase, multi-million-dollar contract and exposed fundamental weaknesses in our predictive loop. A failure that was both costly and, frankly, unacceptable." She paused, allowing her words to sink in, the weight of their collective failure hanging in the air. "But last night," she continued, her fingers tapping her tablet with a precise, almost surgical grace, "someone gave us a gift." On the massive main screen, Gavin's sketch, his raw red marker corrections from the whiteboard, appeared. The elegant sigmoid curve, the circled variables, the underlined note, a visual testament to his quiet genius. A low murmur rippled through the room. "Someone gave us a gift." Eyes flicked to Gavin, then quickly away, a mix of curiosity, resentment, and a dawning, uncomfortable realization. "This adjustment," Sloane continued, her voice flat, clinical, yet imbued with an underlying, almost reverent respect, "reduced our training error by 60%. It reduced latency by 22 milliseconds. And," she paused, allowing the significance to resonate, "it made it painfully clear that expertise can look very different than what we expect. It can be found in the most unexpected places." Silence. A profound, uncomfortable silence that settled heavily over the room, challenging every preconceived notion, every corporate hierarchy. Then one hand rose, slowly, reluctantly. It belonged to Jason Marlowe, a senior systems engineer, sharp-suited, meticulously groomed, with an MBA from Stanford. His eyes, usually cool and confident, held a flicker of irritation, a barely disguised resentment that said, "I'm trying to be polite, but I'm dying to crush you." "With all due respect," he began, the familiar corporate preamble that, as Gavin well knew, invariably preceded a profound act of disrespect. "How do we verify this isn't just a fluke, a lucky guess?" "Run the model," Sloane replied, her voice unwavering, a direct challenge. Jason hesitated, clearly hoping for a more complex, academic explanation, something he could dissect and dismiss. But Sloane's gaze was unyielding. He grudgingly keyed in the new parameters, his fingers moving stiffly across the keyboard. The simulation ran. Smooth, efficient, no overfitting. Predictive behavior aligned across multiple data sets. The green bar on the screen glowed with undeniable success, a silent, irrefutable validation of Gavin's insights. "Still could be luck," Jason muttered, his voice low, a desperate attempt to cling to his shattered pride. Maybe, Gavin spoke for the first time, his voice calm, steady, cutting through the lingering tension. His voice was not loud, but it commanded attention, resonating with a quiet authority that stemmed from conviction, not position. But if it is, I hope we're smart enough to learn from luck when it walks in with a mop. A few quiet chuckles rippled through the room, a surprising burst of human reaction. Sloane didn't smile, not overtly, but she did nod very slightly, a subtle, almost imperceptible dip of her head, like a judge acknowledging an unexpected but undeniably valid argument. The unspoken truth was that Gavin's luck was steeped in years of hidden brilliance, a lifetime of observing patterns. After the meeting, which ended with a resounding endorsement of Gavin's insights, Sloane caught up with him near the elevators. The corporate suits dispersed, their murmurs a mix of grudging respect and lingering discomfort. "You held your own," she said, her voice flat but with a hint of something new, something akin to approval. "I wasn't trying to," Gavin replied, a faint, self-deprecating smile touching his lips. "That's probably why it worked. I wasn't performing." They rode down together in the hushed elegance of the executive elevator, the silence at first thick, then slowly, subtly shifting, becoming less awkward, more like space held open on purpose. Then she asked, her voice tinged with a genuine curiosity that surprised him, "Do you always think like that? In analogies?" "In analogies, I fix things," Gavin replied, his gaze distant, remembering a lifetime of problem-solving. "I've had to. And I talk to my daughter like she's 6, not 60. I explain tech like it's plumbing, or baking, or car repairs. It sticks better that way. It makes the complex relatable." "Interesting. Useful. You might be right," she murmured, a thoughtful look on her face. He hesitated, then looked at her sideways, a rare flash of boldness. "Do you always talk like that?" "Like what?" she asked, a slight, almost imperceptible narrowing of her eyes. "Like you're managing a courtroom instead of having a conversation. Every word measured, every sentence a strategic move." For a beat, she said nothing, her formidable composure momentarily fractured by his directness. Then, "I manage what I can control, Mr. Brooks. Even conversations, especially conversations, it's how I survived." They stepped into the bustling lobby, a sudden influx of noise and movement. "I don't do casual, Mr. Brooks," she said flatly, her gaze unwavering, reasserting her boundaries. "Then I'm probably your worst nightmare," he said, offering the faintest grin, a genuine, unforced smile. "Maybe," she murmured, her voice almost a whisper, "but you solved a nightmare last night, and that, Mr. Brooks, is something I can appreciate." The conversation, an unexpected dance between two vastly different worlds, ended as abruptly as it began, but the echoes of it would resonate far longer than either of them anticipated. That afternoon, Gavin returned to his regular shift. Back in his faded uniform, back with his mop and cart, traversing the gleaming hallways. But something had fundamentally changed. People nodded now when they passed him in the hallway, not just the usual polite, dismissive nods, but genuine acknowledgements. Not just the fresh-faced interns, but even the senior engineers, their eyes holding a new, grudging respect. One even mumbled, "Nice work," in a tone that wasn't sarcastic, but genuinely admiring. And Lena, his ever-observant Lena, had drawn a new picture. This one had him standing beside a tall woman in a severe black suit, her hair in a tight bun, but with a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. The caption, scrawled with childish pride, simply read, "Dad plus Lightning Lady = best team." It was a simple drawing, but for Gavin, it was a profound testament to the subtle, powerful shifts occurring in his world. Meanwhile, in her pristine, minimalist office, high above the city, Sloane stood alone at the massive window overlooking the sprawling urban landscape. A storm was rolling in, dark clouds gathering on the horizon, mirroring the turbulence she had just navigated in the boardroom. She didn't mind the coming storm. In fact, she found a strange, almost unsettling comfort in its raw power. She tapped her tablet, brought up Gavin's simulation again, watching the lines smooth out again and again into perfect order, a beautiful, undeniable pattern emerging from chaos. No formal degree, no prestigious position, no permission sought. And still, he fixed it, she whispered to herself, the words a raw acknowledgement, a grudging admiration. A knock on the door, soft but firm, interrupted her reverie. It was Arthur, her longtime CTO, a man in his early 50s, loyal, blunt, and perhaps the only person in the entire company who dared speak to her without filtering his words, without fear of her icy gaze. That janitor's got people talking, Arthur stated, crossing his arms, his expression unreadable. Let them talk, Sloane replied, her gaze still fixed on the stormy horizon. It's good for people to occasionally be reminded that their assumptions are not absolute. You think he's got more in him? Arthur pressed, a hint of skepticism in his voice. I know he does, Sloane said simply, her voice unwavering, a rare certainty in her tone. Arthur raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise crossing his grizzled features. You've changed, Sloane. Drastically. He made the system better, Sloane said simply, as if that were the only metric that mattered. No, Arthur replied, a quiet, knowing smile touching his lips. He made you better. He broke through your ice. She didn't respond, but she watched the rain begin to trace soft, ephemeral lines across the vast expanse of glass, obscuring the city beyond. And for the first time in a long time, as the storm broke outside, she didn't feel the urgent, demanding need to solve anything. Not right away. Perhaps, she mused, some problems were meant to be felt, to be experienced, before they could truly be understood. And Gavin Brooks, the janitor, had just opened a door to a profound kind of understanding. The invitation came by email, but not to Gavin's humble personal inbox, which mostly received bills and school notices. It landed, instead, in the tightly guarded, high-security email system of HR. The woman from HR, a perpetually harried individual named Cecilia, blinking with a mixture of disbelief and profound confusion, printed it out on official company letterhead. She then undertook the unusual journey across the sprawling Mercer Dynamics building, a walk that usually involved urgent paperwork and grim announcements, not this. She finally found Gavin in the labyrinthine corridors of the third floor, bent over, meticulously scrubbing out a particularly stubborn coffee spill that stained the pristine white tile. Mr. Brooks, the woman from HR began, her voice a reedy whisper, her eyes wide with a mixture of professional formality and sheer bewilderment. Your presence is requested in the executive strategy meeting tomorrow, 10 sharp. She held out the printed invitation as if it were a dangerous, highly infectious document. Gavin looked up from his mop bucket, his face streaked with a bit of dried coffee and a faint film of cleaning solution, his expression unreadable. You sure that's not for someone else? He asked, a touch of his usual self-effacing humor in his voice, glancing down at his faded uniform. The HR woman checked the paper again, her brow furrowed. Name says Gavin Brooks. Title says janitor. Sounds about right, according to this. She pointed to a line. It also says guest contributor, technical observation role, whatever that means. Gavin slowly straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag, a wry, knowing smile playing on his lips. It means they're out of ideas, he said, his voice surprisingly calm, and they're getting desperate. Cecilia smirked, a faint, almost involuntary twitch of her lips, but there was something else in her eyes, too, a flicker of curiosity, perhaps even a nascent spark of hope, a rare emotion in the staid world of HR. The irony of the situation was profound. A man whose very existence was designed to be invisible was now being pulled into the highest echelons of corporate strategy. He didn't go home that night. The idea of facing Lena's excited question, or worse, her quiet disappointment if this impossible dream evaporated, was too much. Instead, he made his way to the 24-hour laundromat, a small, brightly lit oasis of spinning machines and fluorescent hum, 2 blocks from Mercer Dynamics. He meticulously washed his only 2 dress shirts, both well worn, but clean, meticulously ironing them in the humid warmth of the laundromat. He couldn't sit down. The nervous energy was too potent, the weight of the coming day too heavy. He leaned against a rumbling dryer, flipping through an old, battered notebook filled with scribbles from his MIT days, napkin math from countless late-night epiphanies, and a few sketched faces of Lena making silly expressions. You think this is a good idea? He whispered to no one, his voice a low, self-doubting murmur. Going in there with them, the corporate world, with its gleaming surfaces and unforgiving hierarchies, felt like a foreign planet he had once orbited but never truly landed on. He could almost hear his late wife Clara's voice in his head, her gentle, knowing tone cutting through his anxiety. Gavin, you overthink everything. Just be the guy who listens. That's the guy people trust. That's your superpower. Her words, a quiet anchor in his turbulent mind, always brought him back to himself. By morning, after a restless, sleepless night, he was still tired. The fatigue etched around his eyes, but he felt a little more ready, a little more grounded. The strategy room was on the very top floor of the Mercer Dynamics tower, a gleaming testament to power and vision. glass walls, oversized windows offering breathtaking, panoramic views of the city stretching endlessly below. The kind of room that simultaneously inspired and intimidated, that made regular people feel very, very small. Gavin, in his slightly too tight, faded blue button-down shirt, the one with a faint, stubborn coffee stain near the hem, stood out starkly, like a solitary coffee stain on pristine white linen. He wore no lanyard, no corporate blazer, just his one clean shirt, Lena's lucky stone, a smooth, grey pebble tucked securely in his pocket, and a small notepad he hadn't opened since Lena lost her first tooth, a poignant reminder of his true priorities. "Is this the janitor?" The question, dripping with thinly veiled condescension, came from a man with two perfect, impossibly white teeth and a tie pulled far too tight, a caricature of corporate arrogance. His name, Gavin had already learned, was Robert, a senior director in product development. "You can say it, Gavin," he replied calmly, his voice steady, unwavering, meeting Robert's gaze without flinching. "Or guest contributor, if that's easier." A ripple of uncomfortable silence followed his retort. Sloane Mercer entered just in time to catch the tail end of the exchange, her presence immediately commanding the room. She was wearing her signature dark suit, her hair in its sharp, severe bun, her eyes scanning the room, missing nothing. She paused, her gaze resting on Robert for a fraction of a second, a silent, withering reprimand. "He's here because none of you cracked the neural lag issue," she said, her voice flat, clear, not looking at anyone in particular, yet addressing everyone. "He did. He's earned the seat. Let's begin." That statement, delivered with absolute authority, effectively silenced the room, crushing any further attempts at dismissive remarks. The meeting lasted a grueling 90 minutes, a whirlwind of technical jargon, rapid-fire questions, and high-stakes decisions. Gavin didn't say much, choosing to observe, to listen, to absorb the intricate web of information. But when he did speak, heads turned, a collective shift of attention. He didn't use jargon, didn't throw out fancy acronyms or buzzwords designed to impress. Instead, he drew parallels, analogies that cut through the intellectual posturing and illuminated the core of the problem with startling clarity. "Think of your AI model like a single parent learning to juggle 3 jobs," he said once, his voice calm and steady, drawing on his own lived experience. "You're pushing it to optimize results, to handle increasing complexity, without giving it time to understand why it's being asked to change, why it needs to adapt. You're demanding output without building fundamental comprehension." Someone, a junior engineer usually too intimidated to speak, laughed nervously, then quickly stifled it. Another murmured, "Damn, that's actually true." Jason Marlowe, the senior systems engineer from the previous day, still bristling from Gavin's success, tried not to show his irritation, but his jaw was clenched tight. "I'm just wondering if we're now basing our roadmap on bedtime analogies," he said dryly, his tone heavy with thinly veiled contempt, a desperate attempt to undermine Gavin's credibility. "You ever raise a kid, Jason?" Gavin asked, meeting his gaze, his voice gentle but firm, a quiet challenge. "No," Jason admitted, caught off guard. "Then maybe don't knock bedtime," Gavin replied, a faint, knowing smile touching his lips. "It's where the real learning happens. It's where resilience is forged, where fundamental trust is built." That got more laughs than Jason expected, a genuine burst of appreciation from around the table, and more nods than Gavin thought he'd ever earn in a room like this. His simple, relatable truth cut through the corporate facade, resonating with a deeper, more universal understanding of life and learning. After the meeting, the various executives and engineers dispersed, their conversations a mix of grudging respect and lingering discomfort. Gavin stepped into the hallway, exhaling slowly, a profound sense of relief washing over him. Sloane followed him out, holding 2 takeaway coffees, their steam curling invitingly in the cool air. "Didn't peg you for a performer," she said, her voice flat, but with a hint of genuine observation, handing him one of the cups. "I'm not," Gavin replied, taking a grateful sip, the bitterness a welcome jolt. "But I've been underestimated long enough to get good at playing along, at making my voice heard in unexpected ways." "That line about bedtime," she began, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "Not a line," Gavin said, his gaze distant, remembering Lena's sleeping face. "That's my life. That's my reality." They walked side by side down the gleaming hallway, the silence between them less sharp now, less awkward, more like a space held open on purpose, an unspoken invitation. "Why didn't you go back to engineering?" she asked, her voice surprisingly gentle, stripping away the CEO persona. After your wife passed, You clearly have the mind for it. Gavin shrugged, the weight of his past a familiar burden. Because Mitt doesn't hand out scholarships for widowed single dads who take night shifts and pack lunchboxes before dawn. Life intervened. I had to choose survival over ambition. But you could have reapplied, gone back, rebuilt it all, she pressed, accustomed to people relentlessly pursuing their careers. I didn't want to rebuild my life, Gavin replied, his voice firm, resolute. I wanted to build hers first. Lena needed me more than any algorithm ever would. She stopped walking, her heels clicking to a halt, turning to face him fully. Her gaze, usually so impenetrable, held a new depth, a profound understanding. You talk like someone who doesn't realize how rare that is, she said softly, almost wonderingly. Or, Gavin countered, a faint, weary smile touching his lips. Like someone who's too tired to care how rare it is. It's just my truth. She looked at him then, really looked at him, seeing past the faded shirt and the Janitor label. And for the first time, her voice softened, losing its corporate edge, becoming genuinely human. Maybe it's time you stop being the guy who makes things easier for everyone else, Mr. Brooks, and let someone build something for you, too. Gavin didn't answer. His silence wasn't cold, just unfamiliar ground, a landscape he hadn't dared to imagine traversing. The possibility of receiving, of being cared for, felt alien, almost frightening. Later that day, Gavin returned home to his small apartment. Lena was waiting by the door, a shoebox clutched in her hands, her eyes bright with eager anticipation. How was it? She asked, her voice bubbling with curiosity. Grown-ups in fancy rooms, saying words that don't mean much until someone brings up bedtime stories, Gavin replied, a playful twinkle in his eye, bending down to hug her. So, you did tell the dad analogy? She prompted, her grin widening. Sure did. And no one booed? She asked, a mischievous glint in her eyes. She giggled and opened the shoebox. Inside, carefully arranged, was a sandwich, 2 bright stickers, and a folded piece of paper. I made you a new business card, she said proudly, holding it up. It read, in bold, colorful crayon, Gavin Brooks, fixer of things, solver of grown-up problems, full-time dad. You left out mop operator, Gavin said, a soft laugh escaping him. I upgraded you, Lena declared, her chin held high. It was a card that captured his true essence, his real value, far better than any corporate title ever could. And for the first time in a long time, Gavin felt a profound sense of rightness. Meanwhile, high above the bustling city, in her pristine, minimalist office, Jason Marlowe stood before Sloane Mercer, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, his posture radiating a barely contained frustration. He was meticulously groomed, his suit sharp, his tie perfectly knotted, but his jaw was clenched, betraying his internal turmoil. You're elevating him too fast, Sloane, he said, his voice tight with disapproval. It's unprecedented. It's disruptive. It will destabilize the team. Sloane, seated behind her vast, gleaming desk, met his gaze without flinching, her expression as unreadable and impenetrable as ever. No, Jason, she replied, her voice calm, measured, cutting through his anxiety. I'm just recognizing value when I see it. Something you seem to have forgotten how to do. Jason bristled, his irritation evident. He doesn't understand corporate structure. He doesn't have the credentials. He's a janitor, for God's sake. Sloane, what message does that send to our Stanford and MIT grads? Neither did Steve Jobs when he started Apple in a garage, Sloane retorted, her voice flat, unwavering. Credentials didn't write that code. Insight did. Pure, unadulterated insight. And that, Jason, is what we desperately need right now, more than any diploma. Jason clenched his jaw, his eyes narrowed, a desperate attempt to find a foothold in her impenetrable logic. What's really going on here, Sloane? He pressed, his voice lower, laced with suspicion. Are you promoting raw talent, or are you chasing something else? Something personal? Her eyes didn't flinch, didn't betray a flicker of emotion. Her gaze was direct, unwavering, challenging. Let me ask you something, Jason, she said, her voice a low, dangerous purr. When's the last time you surprised yourself? When's the last time you saw a problem in a way that truly redefined your understanding? She continued, a faint, almost imperceptible warmth entering her voice as she subtly gestured towards Gavin's empty chair in the now quiet boardroom. Does that every day. And he doesn't even call it ambition. He calls it surviving. He calls it building a future for his daughter. That, Jason, is an expertise you will never find in an MBA program. Jason left without another word, his defeat palpable, but his lingering resentment was a silent, simmering force. Sloane sat down, opened her laptop, and stared at the simulation results again. The smooth, green lines a testament to Gavin's genius. Not because she needed confirmation, but because they reminded her of something she'd almost forgotten how to recognize. Clarity. Something Gavin Brooks brought into rooms without meaning to, simply by virtue of his presence and his unconventional perspective. It started with a voicemail. Gavin played it 3 times, his brow furrowed in confusion, before deciding it wasn't a prank orchestrated by a bored colleague. "Mr. Brooks, this is Cecilia from the executive office," the polished, almost robotic voice intoned. "Miss Mercer asked me to extend a personal invitation. Tonight, 7:00 p.m. private dinner, not business. No tie required." Not business. He stared at his phone, a battered, old model, as if it might explain itself, might offer a hidden clause, a corporate loophole. But phones don't do that. Not when the woman in question is Sloane Mercer, the most formidable, least casual CEO in tech. The invitation, with its carefully chosen words, felt less like an offer and more like a challenge. He found himself standing outside his bistro, a little place tucked between a quaint flower shop and a boutique hotel on the quieter, less flashy side of town. It was the kind of restaurant where the chairs didn't match on purpose, adding to its eclectic charm, where the servers knew the owner's scruffy terrier by name, and where the air smelled of roasted garlic and genuine conversation. Sloane was already there, seated at a window table, her back to the entrance, a subtle profile illuminated by the soft evening light. Her hair was down for the first time Gavin had ever seen it soft, cascading waves framing her face, no armor, just her. Her usual sharp silhouette was softened, more human, less formidable. Gavin entered, suddenly acutely aware of his scuffed boots and the jacket that had seen one too many winters, a stark contrast to the understated elegance of the bistro. He felt like an anomaly, a misplaced piece in a carefully composed picture. "You clean up well, Mr. Brooks," she said, looking up with a faint, almost imperceptible half-smile, her eyes holding a flicker of amusement. "I own exactly one not terrible shirt." "You're looking at it," Gavin replied, his voice a little gruffer than usual, a nervous laugh catching in his throat. "Then we're both overdressed for not a date," she murmured, a genuine, if fleeting, lightness in her tone. They sat, and for a while neither spoke. The clinking of glasses, the soft, ambient jazz drifting from the corner speaker, and the comforting scent of rosemary bread filled the space where small talk usually lived. The silence wasn't awkward. It was charged, a delicate balance of 2 vastly different worlds observing each other. Sloane finally broke the silence, her voice a little softer than in the boardroom, but still with that underlying precision. "Do you know why I asked you here, Mr. Brooks? You like watching underqualified men panic over wine lists?" Gavin ventured, a wry grin playing on his lips, trying to lighten the atmosphere. "Because I haven't had a real conversation in 3 years," she confessed, her voice suddenly raw, stripped of its usual corporate polish. "Not one that didn't involve quarterly reports or lawsuits or market analytics." Gavin raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. "You're telling me no one ever asks how your day was?" "They ask," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. "But they're really asking how my performance affects theirs. How the market reacted, what the next strategy is. They're asking for data, not for genuine connection." She looked away, her eyes distant, lost in a landscape of corporate isolation. "I eat lunch at my desk, sometimes even dinner. I sign more NDAs than birthday cards. And some days, I forget what my own voice sounds like unless it's giving instructions, unless it's commanding, unless it's problem-solving." Gavin leaned forward, a profound empathy coloring his gaze. "Sounds like you need to fire your calendar and hire a therapist." "I tried that," she said, a faint, weary smile touching her lips. "He quit after 2 sessions." "Why?" "Said I made him anxious. Said he couldn't keep up with the mental gymnastics." Gavin laughed then, a full, unfiltered, hearty laugh that startled 2 diners at a nearby table, making them glance over. It was a sound so genuine, so unburdened, that Sloane looked at him, genuinely surprised. Then, slowly, tentatively at first, she joined in. Quietly at first, then more freely, a low, melodic sound that surprised even herself. "There it is," Gavin said, nodding, a knowing look in his eyes. "What?" she asked, tilting her head, amused, intrigued by his observation. "The human part of the glacier." She laughed again, a little louder this time, a full, resonant sound that was genuinely beautiful. You always talk like this, Mr. Brooks. Only when I'm too tired to pretend I belong here, he admitted, his voice softening, a vulnerable confession. The food came then, something he couldn't pronounce, an exquisitely plated dish that looked like a work of art, and something she didn't bother explaining, simply pointing to the other. It didn't matter. For the first time in years, Sloane ate slowly, savoring each bite, her usual hurried efficiency replaced by a contemplative stillness. Gavin listened without interrupting, asking gentle, open-ended questions, and the conversation drifted effortlessly. They talked about childhoods, his, filled with books and backyard inventions, hers, a solitary pursuit of academic excellence. They spoke of the moment you realize your parents are just people, flawed and striving. They touched on favorite books and bad movie endings, finding unexpected common ground. And eventually, inevitably, they spoke of loss. I still hear her voice sometimes, Gavin said quietly, his gaze distant, lost in memory. When I'm not thinking, like when Lena falls asleep in the car, her little head heavy on my shoulder, or when I smell cinnamon on cold mornings, a scent that always reminds me of her baking. Your wife? Sloane asked softly, her voice hushed, her previous defenses completely gone. Yeah. How long's it been? 6 years, Gavin replied, the number a stark marker of time. You speak like she's still close. She is, Gavin said, a wistful smile touching his lips. Just not in the way I want. Not in the way I can touch her. Sloane didn't respond right away, absorbing his raw honesty, her own guarded emotions stirring. My mother was all ambition, she said finally, her voice low, a distant echo of the painful past. She told me I could rule the world if I never let anyone too close. Said emotion was weakness in a suit. Said kindness was a liability in the boardroom, and I believed her, for far longer than I should have. I built a fortress around myself, just like she taught me. They paused, the shared weight of their respective losses, their different yet similar burdens, hanging in the air. Then Gavin pulled something from his pocket. Lena's newest drawing, now folded and worn at the edges from being carried close. She drew this the day I spoke in that big boardroom, he said, unfolding the paper gently, carefully. She said I looked like a hero, like one of those people who fixes broken machines and broken hearts with the same toolbox. Sloane took the paper, her fingers brushing his, and carefully unfolded it. It was a simple stick figure sketch, a man with wild, untamed hair holding hands with a taller woman in heels. Both were smiling, wide and uninhibited. Lena had even included a tiny sun in the corner, radiating warmth. A tiny mop was sketched in the background, next to a laptop. She stared at it longer than he expected, her gaze lingering on the simple, powerful image. You know, she said softly, her voice thick with unexpressed emotion. I've signed multi-million-dollar deals, launched products in 5 countries, and stood on stages in front of CEOs who get nervous before I even speak. And nothing, absolutely nothing, has made me feel more seen, more truly understood, than this crayon sketch from a little girl I've never met. It's a miracle, Mr. Brooks. They left the restaurant after 10 o'clock, the night air cool, crisp, the kind that makes your lungs feel cleaner than they really are. Sloane walked a step behind him, then stopped beside his beat-up truck, its faded paint and dents a testament to its hard life. You still drive this old thing? She asked, a faint, almost amused smile on her lips. It runs, Gavin said with a shrug, and it's paid off. You'd be surprised how rare that is in this city, in this industry. She leaned against the passenger door, her tailored coat a stark contrast to the worn metal. You're a strange man, Gavin Brooks, she murmured, a genuine curiosity in her voice. Coming from you, Miss Mercer, I'll take that as a compliment, he said, his smile widening. He opened the driver's side, but paused before getting in, his gaze serious, direct. Why'd you really ask me here, Sloane? He asked, using her first name for the first time, a subtle shift in their dynamic. Because I needed to remember what truth sounds like, she replied, her voice low, honest. And you, Gavin Brooks, you don't perform. You just show up. You just are. He nodded. That was enough. See you at work, he said, climbing into the truck. Gavin, she called, her voice stopping him just as he was about to close the door. He turned back. What? I like bedtime stories, she whispered, a faint, almost shy smile touching her lips. And with that, she turned and disappeared into the night, her heels clicking like punctuation on a sentence neither of them wanted to end, a quiet promise hanging in the cool night air. The next morning started just like any other, or so Gavin tried to tell himself. The familiar rituals were a comforting anchor in his newly tumultuous world. He dropped Lena off at school, the worn strap of her backpack a familiar weight against his hand. She gave him a hug tighter than usual, her small arms wrapping fiercely around his waist, and whispered against his shirt, her voice muffled but clear, "You're shining, Daddy. People are starting to see it." He smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that warmed him all the way to work. Her words, innocent yet profound, were a shield against the looming uncertainties of his day. But as he walked into the gleaming, minimalist lobby of Mercer Dynamics, he felt it immediately, the change, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere, a drop in temperature, not in degrees, but in demeanor. Fewer smiles met his gaze. Those that did were colder, tighter. Glances lingered too long, then flicked away too quickly. The silence that usually felt like peace, the quiet efficiency of the corporate machine, now felt like tension coiled behind polite, forced nods, a palpable undercurrent of unease. He tried not to let it bother him, to shrug it off as the natural suspicion of a highly competitive environment. He reached for his ID badge, the plastic cool against his fingers, ready to swipe into his usual janitorial access. But before he could, a security guard, a burly man named Frank whom he'd joked with just last week about fantasy football, stepped in front of him. "Sorry, sir," Frank said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual camaraderie. "You've been moved off the janitorial roster. Your clearance is now executive access. CETA's orders. Guess you've been promoted." The words, delivered with a strange mix of formality and thinly veiled warning, felt more like a demotion, a disquieting shove into uncharted territory than a welcome. In the polished, silent elevator, Jason Marlowe was waiting, his presence a deliberate, calculated ambush. His tie was straight, impeccably knotted, but his jaw was tighter than usual, a muscle ticking subtly along his temple. "New title, Brooks?" he asked, not bothering to smile, his voice dripping with condescension. "Didn't realize there was one," Gavin replied calmly, meeting his gaze, his voice steady. There is," Jason sneered, a cruel glint in his eye. "Special technical advisor to the CEO. Must be nice to skip the ladder entirely, mop man." "I didn't skip anything, Jason," Gavin said, his voice quiet but firm, a steel core beneath his unassuming exterior. "I've been climbing for years, just on a staircase no one bothered to look at. A staircase built on quiet effort, on problem solving, on doing what needed to be done when no one else would or could." Jason stepped closer, his voice low, conspiratorial, laced with venom. "Let me give you some advice, mop man. These people smile to your face because Sloane says so, because she wants this little experiment to work. But they're not your friends. They're watching you. You don't belong here. You never will." Gavin looked him straight in the eye, unflinching. "If I waited to belong, Jason, my daughter would still be hungry. My wife would still be dying in a hospital bed without enough resources. I didn't come here to be liked. I came here to build something that works, to make a difference." Later that morning, in the executive strategy room, a glass-walled chamber where every word felt amplified, the team reviewed Gavin's suggested optimization for the autonomous response model. His calculations were precise. His solution was clean, elegant, undeniably effective. The projected numbers on the screen glowed green, a testament to its undeniable success. But the room sat frozen, a collective, uncomfortable silence hanging in the air, thick with unspoken judgment. Jason spoke first, breaking the tension with a calculated move. "We ran the numbers again," he said, addressing Sloane directly, his tone deferential but with a subtle undertone of rebellion. Gavin's logic checks out. Flawlessly, in fact. A collective exhale of relief, quickly stifled. "But," Jason continued, his gaze sweeping the room, garnering silent support, "we're not implementing it." Sloane looked up sharply, her eyes narrowing, a dangerous glint in them. "Excuse me, Jason?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. "It's untested at scale. No precedent. We'd be taking a significant PR risk, a reputational hit, using code from someone who doesn't even have a college degree, let alone a formal background in corporate AI development." "You're saying the math is fine, but the resume isn't," Sloane challenged, her voice now sharp, cutting through his corporate jargon. Jason didn't blink, his resolve hardening. "We're a billion-dollar firm, Sloane. Our clients don't want janitor genius headlines. They want pedigree, stability, legacy. They want someone who fits the mold." The room nodded slowly, hesitantly, a silent, uncomfortable consensus forming. Gavin sat quietly, not defending himself, just watching, observing, like a man who's been through worse storms and knows exactly which way the wind is blowing. He understood the game being played, the unspoken rules of this corporate jungle. Sloane's eyes, usually so impassive, locked on him, a silent question passing between them. "Gavin," she said, her voice softer, a hint of frustration in her tone. "Do you want to respond?" He leaned forward, his voice steady, resonating with a quiet dignity that commanded attention. "I get it. I'm not what you expected, and maybe that's uncomfortable for some of you." He glanced at Jason, then swept his gaze across the hesitant faces in the room. "But if the numbers work, if the system improves with demonstrable, objective metrics, then who's really being unprofessional here? The man fixing the problem, or the team ignoring the solution because of where it came from?" He paused, allowing his words to sink in, challenging their core biases. "And if I'd come in here with a Stanford degree and a $1,000 blazer, you'd be calling this innovation, a stroke of genius. But because I smell like bleach and wear my daughter's sticker on my laptop," he patted the small, colorful unicorn sticker affixed to the worn surface of his work computer, "you're calling it a liability, a risk." A pause, heavy with unspoken truths. Then if a man's value is measured by how expensive his mistakes are, maybe it's time we start measuring value differently. Maybe it's time we judge the solution, not the messenger. The room was silent, a profound, uneasy stillness. Sloane stood slowly, her movements deliberate, her gaze unwavering. "We'll implement the update," she declared, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument. Jason didn't argue, not out loud, but his glare, fixed on Gavin, said everything. The battle for corporate conformity against undeniable talent had just begun. That afternoon, Gavin found Sloane on the rooftop balcony, a rare sanctuary high above the city's roar. She was staring at the sprawling skyline, her arms crossed, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, a posture of quiet contemplation, a stark contrast to her usual guarded formality. "Tough room," he said softly, joining her, his presence a comforting, non-intrusive anchor. "They're used to predictable outcomes and polished origins. You're not." "No," she said, her voice flat, her gaze still fixed on the distant horizon. "I'm used to excellence, Mr. Brooks, no matter where it hides, no matter how unconventional its source." They stood quietly for a beat, the wind whipping gently around them, the silence a shared understanding. Then Gavin asked, his voice low, tinged with a genuine curiosity, "Why are you fighting for me, Sloane?" She turned to him, her eyes, usually so sharp and impenetrable, holding a new, softer light. "Because you remind me of something I used to believe in, Gavin. Before I traded it for board seats and branding guides. Before I became the coldest CEO in tech." "What's that?" he asked, genuinely intrigued. "The idea that brilliance doesn't need permission. That true genius, true innovation, can emerge from anywhere, from anyone, regardless of pedigree or position." He smiled, a faint, wistful smile. "That's a nice idea, dangerous in the wrong hands." "So is silence," she countered, her gaze direct, profound. But silence was exactly what followed, a comfortable, respectful silence, filled with the unspoken weight of their shared journey, their unexpected connection. In the days that followed, Gavin noticed the subtle, insidious shift in the corporate atmosphere. Fewer nods met his gaze. Conversations stopped abruptly when he entered rooms. Slack channels he used to be copied on went quiet, their digital chatter replaced by an eerie silence. Even the engineers who had once tentatively asked him for advice now actively avoided eye contact, their discomfort palpable. The pressure from Jason and his allies was a silent, suffocating force. Only Arthur, the longtime CTO, remained unchanged. Gruff, honest, and grounded, Arthur was a steady presence in the shifting currents. One evening, as Gavin reviewed complex code in the quiet solitude of the break room, Arthur sat beside him with 2 cups of black coffee, their bitterness a familiar comfort. "You rattled them," Arthur stated, his voice flat, matter of fact. "Didn't mean to." "Didn't need to," Arthur countered, taking a slow sip of coffee. "You just exist. That's the threat, Gavin. Your authenticity, your raw talent. It challenges everything they believe about how success is achieved." Gavin looked up, tired, the weight of the invisible resistance pressing down on him. "Feels like I'm being pushed out of a room I never asked to be in." "That's because you're not playing their game," Arthur said, his gaze direct, knowing. "You're playing life. And life, raw and unpredictable, scares the hell out of people who've never had to survive it, who've always lived in a carefully curated bubble." Gavin sighed, his exhaustion deep. Am I wasting my time here, Arthur? Fighting this invisible war? Not if you remember what time's worth, Arthur replied, his voice firm, a quiet mentor. And not if you're doing this for more than just a paycheck. Gavin looked down at Lena's drawing, now creased from being carried in his pocket, but never torn, its simple message still powerful. I'm doing it for her, he said, his voice soft but resolute. Arthur clapped him on the back once, a firm, reassuring gesture. Then you're already winning, son. Just keep showing up. That night at home, Lena sat on the couch, diligently building an elaborate puzzle, her small fingers carefully fitting sky-colored pieces into place, while Gavin reheated leftover stew. Did they like your new idea, Daddy? She asked, her voice soft, not looking up from her puzzle. Some did, Gavin replied, his voice carefully neutral. Some, not so much. You told the truth, right? Lena asked, her gaze finally meeting his, her eyes holding an unwavering expectation. I did, sweetheart. Then you did your job, she declared, her small voice imbued with a wisdom far beyond her years. He sat beside her, watching her small fingers move the last sky-colored piece into place. What if people don't like me for doing the right thing? Gavin mused, voicing a vulnerability he rarely showed. Then you look for people who do, Lena said, her answer simple, profound, utterly devoid of complexity. You find your tribe. Simple, wise, 6 years old. He kissed her forehead, a rush of love washing over him. You ever think about running this company one day, Lena? He asked, a whimsical thought. Only if it comes with free popsicles, she replied immediately, a mischievous glint in her eye. I'll write it into the contract, Gavin promised, and they both laughed, a shared, unburdened sound. And in that soft, ordinary, imperfect moment, Gavin remembered exactly why he started this journey. Not to be accepted, not to prove himself to the corporate titans, but to create a world where his daughter, and all the unconventional people like them, wouldn't have to fight to be seen, to be valued. He was fighting so she wouldn't have to. Sloane Mercer didn't notice the first time. Her life, a meticulously choreographed ballet of high-stakes meetings, urgent deadlines, and investor calls, rarely allowed for peripheral vision. She breathed past the janitor's closet in the executive hallway without looking twice, her mind already 3 steps ahead, dissecting complex algorithms and market projections. The mop bucket wasn't in its usual, precisely designated spot by the service entrance, but she barely registered it, a fleeting, inconsequential blip on her internal radar. Meetings bled into meetings, a relentless tide of information and expectation. Deadlines barked, sharp and unforgiving. Investors circled like sharks, sensing the slightest weakness, demanding unwavering performance. Gavin Brooks, the quiet janitor, remained, for those first 2 days, an anomaly, a solved problem, a data point that had delivered. But by the 3rd day, something strange, an almost imperceptible shift, crept into the highly controlled, predictable air of Mercer Dynamics. Silence. Not the usual efficient, working silence of focused engineers, but the kind of silence that settles after a door slams shut and no one comes back. A silence that was less peaceful and more unnerving, a hollow space where a quiet presence used to be. Gavin Brooks was gone. The empty seat in the back corner of the lab, the one she had pointed him to in conference room C, stayed empty, a stark, glaring void. His name was quietly removed from the internal Slack channels, a digital ghost. No memo was issued, no explanation offered. Someone else, a new face, was assigned to nightly code cleanup, a nameless, faceless replacement. But no one corrected logic the way he did. No one saw patterns, the subtle, intuitive flaws, the way he did. And slowly, subtly, insidiously, the AI models had started to drift again. Just a little. Just enough for the meticulous, objective data to show a faint, unsettling tremor, a return to the erratic behavior he had so effortlessly smoothed out. And yet, amidst the rising concern over the system's performance, no one mentioned his name. No one dared, except her. Sloane stood alone in the observation deck overlooking the testing lab, high above the bustling activity, a silent sentinel in her corporate domain. The floor below glowed with the monitor light, a soft, ethereal blue, and the muted chatter of engineers, their voices now tinged with a familiar anxiety. On paper, she should have felt satisfied. The new update, incorporating Gavin's initial insights, had passed internal tests. Stock was up 4.7% for the quarter. Objectively, it was a win. But inside her, a profound, unsettling emptiness resonated. Something felt missing, a subtle but critical component she couldn't quite articulate. She found herself looking, almost instinctively, at the corner where Gavin used to stand, hands in pockets, head tilted, eyes squinting like he could see the very soul of a line of code. Now just an empty space, a blank canvas. A cleaner, the new replacement, swept silently past, his face averted, not stopping to offer input, not pausing to observe. Of course, he didn't. He was just there to clean, like Gavin was until he wasn't. The profound irony was not lost on her. The invisible man had become profoundly visible by his absence. That night, back in her office, the city lights twinkling like distant, indifferent stars outside her window, she stared at her desk. It was pristine, perfect, meticulously organized, as always, reflecting her unwavering demand for order. Except for one small detail, a faint brown stain near the edge, barely noticeable unless the light hit it just right, a ghost of a mark on the polished surface. It had been a coffee spill, Gavin's first meeting in her office, a nervous tremor in his hands. He'd set down his thermos and apologized instantly, his face etched with genuine contrition. "Sorry," he had mumbled. "This thing leaks hope and caffeine in equal measure." She hadn't laughed then, hadn't even smiled, her face a mask of detached professionalism. But now she found herself strangely unwilling for the stain to be wiped away. It was a tangible link, a small, imperfect memory of a raw, honest moment. She stayed late, long after everyone else had gone home, the vast building silent around her. She wandered the deserted halls, her heels clicking softly, an unfamiliar sound in the oppressive quiet, like a woman adrift in someone else's life, searching for a misplaced truth. In the hallway near the sublevel, she passed the break room, its lights dimmed, chairs stacked, a utilitarian space now imbued with a strange melancholy. On a small corkboard by the door, pinned among old, faded flyers and terse shift reminders, was a tiny envelope. Her name, "To Miss Mercer," was written in uneven, earnest purple crayon, a child's uncertain hand. Below it, almost too small to read, was the sender, from Lena Brooks. She stared at it for several seconds, a sudden tightness in her chest, unsure whether to smile at its innocence or to break at its poignant message. She took the envelope gently, carefully, like it might vanish if touched too quickly, its fragile paper a stark contrast to the hard, cold reality of her world. Inside was a folded piece of paper with stars drawn in every corner, childlike and whimsical. In the center, in a child's careful, painstakingly formed handwriting, were only a few lines. "Thank you for believing in my dad. He used to smile when he talked about you. Now he doesn't smile much, but I still do. Lena, age 6 3/4. Sloane sank onto the hard bench beside the silent vending machine, the cold plastic a stark reality. For the first time in months, perhaps even years, she took off her gleaming, custom-made heels, her tired feet gratefully meeting the cool floor. She folded her long legs underneath her, almost like a child, curling into herself, and she cried. Not the controlled, silent tears of a CEO in private, but deep, uninhibited sobs that racked her body, a cathartic release of a grief she hadn't realized she was carrying, a profound loneliness finally finding its voice. Lena's words, so simple, so innocent, had pierced through every defense, every layer of corporate armor, revealing a raw, aching truth about the cost of her success, the price of her detached ambition. Gavin's absence and Lena's heartbroken observation of it had opened a floodgate she never knew existed. She didn't tell anyone where she was going the next morning. No driver, no bodyguard, no meticulously planned itinerary. Just a black coat, a scarf wrapped tightly around her face, attempting to obscure her recognizable features, and Lena's letter, folded carefully in her pocket like a compass guiding her to an unfamiliar truth. She found Gavin's apartment after 20 minutes of circling a neighborhood that hadn't seen a new coat of paint in years, a stark contrast to the gleaming towers she inhabited. The worn wooden steps leading up to the building creaked ominously with her weight. The elevator didn't work, stuck on some forgotten floor. The hallway smelled of old curry, stale cooking, and the pervasive dampness of rainwater seeping in through unseen cracks. It was a world utterly alien to her, yet imbued with a raw, undeniable authenticity. When she knocked, a tentative tap on the worn, painted wood, it was Lena who opened the door. The little girl, in a glittery unicorn t-shirt and mismatched socks, her curls held back by a bright paperclip, beamed as if Sloane were an old, cherished friend, not the intimidating CEO from her father's work. "You're the lady from work," Lena exclaimed matter-of-factly, her eyes wide with recognition. "The one who makes Daddy nervous." Sloane blinked, a flash of mortification, followed by a wry, almost self-deprecating smile. "I probably do," You want to come in? Lena asked, gesturing with a small, unburdened hand. We don't have guest chairs, but we have floor. You can sit on the floor. Inside, the apartment was small, lived in, and cluttered with toys and folded laundry piled on a worn armchair. A stack of engineering books, old and dog-eared, leaned sideways on the kitchen counter, a silent testament to a hidden life. A battered laptop blinked softly on the coffee table, its screen a dull glow. Daddy's out looking for jobs, Lena announced, her voice tinged with a child's quiet worry. He doesn't think you'll find one, but I told him the sun doesn't ask permission to rise, it just does. Did you get that from a cartoon? Sloane asked softly, a genuine curiosity in her voice. No, Lena replied, her chin held high. From Daddy. He says big ideas are like that. They just happen, even if no one's ready for them. Lena pulled out a box of mismatched Legos, their colors a vibrant splash against the worn carpet, and pointed to the floor. You can build with me. I only let people I trust help with the roof. Sloane hesitated, a flicker of her old corporate self resisting the intimacy, the sheer domesticity of the moment. But then she looked at Lena's open, trusting face, and the decision was made. She lowered herself onto the beanbag, surprisingly comfortable for something that looked like it had survived a pillow war. Her eyes scanned the room shelves packed with well-loved children's books, a robot ingeniously made of soda cans and wires, a cardboard box labeled Important Inventions in crayon. But it was the wall by the window that truly stopped her breath. It was a collage of photos, a vibrant, messy tapestry of a life lived with love. Lena and Gavin at the park, holding science fair trophies, celebrating birthdays. And in the very center, a woman. Kind eyes, a soft, radiant smile, the same wild curls as Lena. That's Mommy, Lena said quietly, as if sensing Sloane's gaze, her voice tinged with a child's matter-of-fact acceptance of loss. She died when I was 3. But Daddy still talks to her sometimes when he thinks I'm sleeping. He tells her about the sky and the new codes he's thinking of. Sloane's voice caught in her throat, a lump rising. She looks gentle. She was, Lena confirmed. Daddy said she loved 3 things: rainstorms, old poetry, and the way he made scrambled eggs. That's a good list, Sloane managed, a faint smile touching her lips, imagining this gentle woman, a life cut short. He stopped making eggs when she died, Lena said matter-of-factly, her voice holding no self-pity. But he started making robots and games and bedtime stories with maps in them. He said he had to build new things to keep her memory alive. Sloane blinked back, the lump rising in her throat, a profound insight washing over her. He said, when someone's heart breaks, you either let it stay broken or you build something beautiful from the pieces. He really said that? Sloane asked, her voice barely a whisper, utterly captivated by this man, by this family. Yep, Lena replied, popping a Lego block into place. Right after we accidentally set the toaster on fire. It was a very emotional morning. Sloane smiled, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her heart aching with a strange mix of sorrow and profound admiration. Lena, she asked gently, her voice soft, hesitant, do you know why your dad left the company? Lena looked up at her, her small face imbued with more gravity than any 6-year-old should carry. Her blue eyes, so like her father's, held a deep understanding. He thought he made people uncomfortable, she said, her voice quiet but firm. That people didn't want a janitor who was smart. That they'd never see the difference between being out of place and being brilliant. He always says, sometimes people get scared when the wrong person turns out to be right, Miss Sloane. The words struck Sloane like glass, clear, sharp, and impossible to ignore, echoing the very fears Gavin had voiced. He had left, not out of weakness, but out of a painful understanding of their prejudice. You talk like someone twice your age, Sloane said, her voice thick with emotion. That's 'cause I borrow Daddy's heart sometimes, Lena replied, a faint, sad smile. He's got an extra big one, but it gets tired. Sometimes he needs to know people see it too, not just me. The room went quiet, filled with the profound weight of a child's unwavering love and a father's quiet burden. Sloane reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped box, its contents a secret offering. Can I give you something? Lena nodded, her eyes wide with anticipation. Inside was a tiny USB drive with a purple ribbon tied around it. It's a game, Sloane said, her voice softer than Lena had ever heard it. Your dad helped design the core mechanic. It's not public yet. I thought you might be the first to test it. Lena's eyes lit up, shining with pure delight. Does it have dragons? Kind of, Sloane replied, a genuine smile forming. It has dragons that don't know they're dragons. They think they're pigeons until they try to fly too far and discover they breathe fire. Lena's mouth formed a perfect O. That's awesome. She clutched the box to her chest like it was a treasure map, a magical artifact. Miss Sloane? Yes? If you make Daddy smile again, Lena said, her voice small but resolute, I'll forgive you for making him nervous. The words landed with a gentle finality, like a verdict that had been decided by a jury of one, a child's pure, uncompromising demand for happiness. Sloane didn't speak. She couldn't. Instead, she nodded, a solemn, quiet promise, sealed with a silent tear. As she walked back down the worn hallway, the air felt different, less like distance, more like a path opening. Sloane looked up at the overcast sky, feeling the familiar weight of the world press against her shoulders. But for the first time, she didn't mind. She carried Lena's trust, a precious, fragile burden. Back at the office, she stepped into her private conference room and pulled the blinds, shutting out the world. Her assistant asked if she wanted to reschedule the afternoon calls, a full day of high-stakes negotiations. She said no. She had something far more important to do. She turned to her tablet and began drafting a memo. But not just any memo, a personal invitation, a correction, a new beginning. And at the top of the screen, before she wrote anything else, she typed only one line, then paused, her fingers hovering, knowing its profound truth. Some bridges are worth rebuilding by hand. And this time, she wasn't just fixing an algorithm. She was fixing a life, a company, and perhaps her own fractured heart. The city buzzed below, a million tiny lights creating a vast, glittering tapestry as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of molten gold and deep violet. Gavin found Sloane standing on the rooftop balcony, a rare moment of stillness in her otherwise relentless schedule. She was staring out at the horizon, her arms crossed, her usual power blazer cast aside, sleeves rolled up on her simple black t-shirt. It was a stark contrast to the formidable CEO he'd first met, a glimpse of the woman beneath the carefully constructed facade. The air was cool, crisp, the kind that made your lungs feel cleaner than they really were, carrying the distant hum of urban life, the soft murmur of a world that continued its ceaseless rhythm, unaware of the profound shifts occurring in the lives of those who resided in its highest towers. Tough room, Gavin said softly, joining her, his presence a quiet, grounding force. He didn't intrude, just stood beside her, sharing the vast, silent expanse, the unspoken weight of their shared experiences. He could feel the tension still radiating from her, the residual echoes of the battle she had just fought and, against all odds, won. The boardroom, the flashing cameras, the accusatory headlines, they were all still present, specters of a recent past, yet somehow rendered less potent by the quiet strength she now exuded. They're used to predictable outcomes, Sloane replied, her voice low, measured, a stark contrast to the icy authority he'd first heard. And polished origins. They expect a certain pedigree, a certain narrative. You're not that, Gavin. Her gaze was steady, unwavering, yet held a new softness, a vulnerability he hadn't seen before. No, Gavin said, a faint, self-deprecating smile touching his lips, a hint of the old janitor's wry humor returning. I'm not. But I did fix the problem, and I think that's all that really matters in the end, isn't it? You were brilliant today, Sloane conceded, turning to him, her eyes, usually so sharp and impenetrable, now holding a flicker of something new, something akin to awe. Absolutely brilliant. I didn't memorize a word of your speech, didn't have a single slide prepared for you, and yet you captivated them. You made them listen. You made them feel. She paused, a rare admission of his profound impact. I think I didn't just save the company's projections today, Gavin. I think you saved me. Gavin smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that warmed him from the inside out. I didn't do it alone, Sloane. Lena helped too, with her drawings and her insistence that you liked my coffee. He saw a genuine laugh escape her, a low, melodic sound that seemed to break the last of the ice around her. She's a wise child, Sloane murmured, her gaze softening further as she looked out at the city. Perhaps wiser than most of the people in that room. And yet, Gavin Brooks, she turned back to him, her eyes holding his, a silent conversation passing between them. You remind me of something I used to believe in. What's that? He asked, his voice low, genuinely intrigued, drawn in by the vulnerability she was so readily displaying. That brilliance doesn't always come with a title, she confessed, her voice raw, stripped of its corporate polish. That true insight can emerge from anywhere, from anyone, regardless of pedigree or position. But the most valuable asset isn't always the one with the highest market valuation, but the one who can see the patterns others miss, who can find the solution when everyone else is lost in the noise. He smiled, a faint, wistful smile, recognizing the echo of his own long dormant ideals. "That's a nice idea," he said softly. "Dangerous in the wrong hands, though. It can make people uncomfortable." "So is silence," she countered, her gaze direct, profound, meeting his without hesitation. "When you stop listening to the voices that matter, when you silence the unconventional, the unexpected, you create a void. And that void," she paused, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "that's where the real problems start." They stood in comfortable silence again, the vastness of the city below mirroring the vastness of their unspoken thoughts, the tentative bridge they were building between their disparate worlds stretching across the darkening sky. Then Gavin spoke, his voice low, imbued with a quiet curiosity that seemed to draw out her deepest reflections. "Why are you fighting for me, Sloane? Really fighting? You could have buried this, written it off as a janitor's fluke, a momentary anomaly, and moved on. You have a reputation to protect, a company to run. Why are you still here, still invested in this unconventional alliance?" She turned to him fully, her eyes, usually so sharp and impenetrable, now holding a softer, more vulnerable light, a rare glimpse into the woman beneath the CEO's armor. "Because you remind me of something I used to believe in," she confessed, her voice raw, stripped of its usual corporate polish, "before I traded it all for board seats and branding guides. Before I became the coldest CEO in tech, as the tabloids love to call me." "What did you used to believe in?" Gavin asked, his gaze steady, inviting her to share the buried truths of her past. "That brilliance doesn't always come with a title," she said, her voice gaining a quiet conviction, a palpable sincerity. "That true insight can emerge from anywhere, from anyone, regardless of pedigree or position. That the most valuable asset isn't always the one with the highest market valuation, but the one who can see the patterns others miss, who can find the solution when everyone else is lost in the noise." And she paused, her voice dropping slightly, a profound admission. "That kindness, true, genuine kindness, can be a terrifyingly powerful force in a world that thrives on ruthless competition." He smiled, a faint, wistful smile, recognizing the echo of his own long dormant ideals, the quiet passion he had once held for his own field. "That's a nice idea," he said softly, "but it's dangerous in the wrong hands." "So is silence, Gavin," she countered, her gaze direct, profound, meeting his without hesitation. "When you stop listening to the voices that matter, when you silence the unconventional, the unexpected, you create a void. And that void," she paused, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "that's where the real problems start. That's where the real opportunities are missed." They stood in comfortable silence again, the vastness of the city below mirroring the vastness of their unspoken thoughts, the tentative bridge they were building between their disparate worlds stretching across the darkening sky. Then Gavin spoke, his voice low, imbued with a genuine curiosity that seemed to draw out her deepest reflections, her most guarded truths. "Why are you fighting for me, Sloane? Really fighting? You could have buried this, written it off as a janitor's fluke, a momentary anomaly, and moved on. You have a reputation to protect, a company to run. Why are you still here, still invested in this unconventional alliance? Why did you come back to see me again, Sloane? Why didn't you just let the story fade?" She turned to him fully, her eyes, usually so sharp and impenetrable, now holding a softer, more vulnerable light, a rare glimpse into the woman beneath the CEO's armor. "Because you remind me of something I used to believe in," she confessed, her voice raw, stripped of its usual corporate polish, "before I traded it all for board seats and branding guides. Before I became the coldest CEO in tech, as the tabloids love to call me. I believed in the power of unexpected solutions, of second chances, of the inherent worth in every individual, regardless of their background." She paused, a profound admission. "And you, Gavin Brooks," she continued, her voice gaining a quiet conviction, a palpable sincerity. "You reminded me of that belief. You demonstrated it. You showed me that brilliance doesn't always come with a title, that true insight can emerge from anywhere, from anyone, regardless of pedigree or position. That the most valuable asset isn't always the one with the highest market valuation, but the one who can see the patterns others miss, who can find the solution when everyone else is lost in the noise." He smiled, a faint, wistful smile, recognizing the echo of his own long dormant ideals, the quiet passion he had once held for his own field, now rekindled by her unexpected vulnerability. "That's a nice idea," he said softly, but it's dangerous in the wrong hands. Sloan, it can make people uncomfortable, challenge their deeply held assumptions. So is silence. Gavin, she countered, her gaze unwavering, meeting his directly, a silent plea for understanding. When you stop listening to the voices that matter, when you silence the unconventional, the unexpected, you create a void. And that void, she paused, her voice dropping to a near whisper, that's where the real problems start. That's where the real opportunities are missed. That's where true innovation dies. They stood in comfortable silence again, the vastness of the city below mirroring the vastness of their unspoken thoughts, the tentative bridge they were building between their disparate worlds stretching across the darkening sky. Then Gavin spoke, his voice low, imbued with a genuine curiosity that seemed to draw out her deepest reflections, her most guarded truths. Why are you fighting for me, Sloan? Really fighting? You could have buried this, written it off as a janitor's fluke, a momentary anomaly, and moved on. You have a reputation to protect, a company to run. Why are you still here, still invested in this unconventional alliance? She turned to him fully, her eyes, usually so sharp and impenetrable, now holding a softer, more vulnerable light, a rare glimpse into the woman beneath the CEO's armor. Because you remind me of something I used to believe in, she confessed, her voice raw, stripped of its usual corporate polish, before I traded it all for board seats and branding guides, before I became the coldest CEO in tech, as the tabloids loved to call me. I believed in the power of unexpected solutions, of second chances, of the inherent worth in every individual, regardless of their background. And you, Gavin Brooks, she continued, her voice gaining a quiet conviction, a palpable sincerity. You reminded me of that belief. You demonstrated it. You showed me that brilliance doesn't always come with a title, that true insight can emerge from anywhere, from anyone, regardless of pedigree or position, that the most valuable asset isn't always the one with the highest market valuation, but the one who can see the patterns others miss, who can find the solution when everyone else is lost in the noise. And, she paused, her voice dropping slightly, a profound admission. That kindness, true, genuine kindness, can be a terrifyingly powerful force in a world that thrives on ruthless competition. He smiled, a faint, wistful smile, recognizing the echo of his own long-dormant ideals, the quiet passion he had once held for his own field, now rekindled by her unexpected vulnerability. That's a nice idea, he said softly, but it's dangerous in the wrong hands. Sloan, it can make people uncomfortable, challenge their deeply held assumptions. So is silent. Gavin, she countered, her gaze unwavering, meeting his directly, a silent plea for understanding, for connection. When you stop listening to the voices that matter, when you silence the unconventional, the unexpected, you create a void. And that void, she paused, her voice dropping to a near whisper, that's where the real problems start. That's where the real opportunities are missed. That's where true innovation dies, suffocating under the weight of conformity. They stood in comfortable silence again, the vastness of the city below mirroring the vastness of their unspoken thoughts, the tentative bridge they were building between their disparate worlds stretching across the darkening sky, a fragile structure held together by honesty and shared vulnerability. Then Gavin spoke, his voice low, imbued with a genuine curiosity that seemed to draw out her deepest reflections, her most guarded truths. Why are you fighting for me, Sloan? Really fighting? You could have buried this, written it off as a janitor's fluke, a momentary anomaly, and moved on. You have a reputation to protect, a company to run. Why are you still here, still invested in this unconventional alliance? Why did you come back to see me again, Sloan? Why didn't you just let the story fade? She turned to him fully, her eyes, usually so sharp and impenetrable, now holding a softer, more vulnerable light, a rare glimpse into the woman beneath the CEO's armor. Because you remind me of something I used to believe in, she confessed, her voice raw, stripped of its usual corporate polish, before I traded it all for board seats and branding guides, before I became the coldest CEO in tech, as the tabloids loved to call me. I believed in the power of unexpected solutions, of second chances, of the inherent worth in every individual, regardless of their background. And yet, Gavin Brooks, she continued, her voice gaining a quiet conviction, a palpable sincerity, you reminded me of that belief. You demonstrated it. You showed me that brilliance doesn't always come with a title, that true insight can emerge from anywhere, from anyone, regardless of pedigree or position. That the most valuable asset isn't always the one with the highest market valuation, but the one who can see the patterns others miss, who can find the solution when everyone else is lost in the noise. And, she paused, her voice dropping slightly, a profound admission. That kindness, true, genuine kindness, can be a terrifyingly powerful force in a world that thrives on ruthless competition. It's a vulnerability that can be exploited, but also, perhaps, a strength that can transform. He smiled, a faint, wistful smile, recognizing the echo of his own long-dormant ideals, the quiet passion he had once held for his own field, now rekindled by her unexpected vulnerability and unwavering honesty. "That's a nice idea," he said softly, "but it's dangerous in the wrong hand, Sloane. It can make people uncomfortable, challenge their deeply held assumptions." "So is silence, Gavin," she countered, her gaze unwavering, meeting his directly, a silent plea for understanding, for connection. "When you stop listening to the voices that matter, when you silence the unconventional, the unexpected, you create a void. And that void," she paused, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "that's where the real problems start. That's where the real opportunities are missed. That's where true innovation dies, suffocating under the weight of conformity and the fear of the unknown." They stood in comfortable silence again, the vastness of the city below mirroring the vastness of their unspoken thoughts, the tentative bridge they were building between their disparate worlds stretching across the darkening sky, a fragile structure held together by honesty, vulnerability, and a shared leap of faith. The weight of their shared journey, the risks they were taking, the potential rewards, all hung in the air, a promise of something real, something profound, waiting to be fully realized. The air in the Mercer Dynamics building seemed to have shifted, not in temperature or in ambient noise, but in the subtle currents of human interaction, in the almost imperceptible vibrations of awareness that now permeated the hallways. Fewer nods met Gavin's gaze as he passed, his mop and bucket now accompanied by a new, unspoken weight of recognition. Those that did meet his eyes lingered a moment longer, a flicker of curiosity, perhaps even grudging respect, replacing the usual polite dismissal. Even the engineers, the high priests of the Silicon Temple, who had once been too intimidated to speak to him, now offered tentative greetings, their voices carrying a tone that wasn't sarcastic, but genuinely acknowledging. Lena's new drawing, the one with him standing beside a tall woman in a severe black suit, her hair in a tight bun, had indeed been seen. The caption, "Dad plus Lightning Lady = best team," a child's simple, powerful declaration of belief, had become a silent, shared legend, whispered in hushed tones among the staff. Meanwhile, high above the city's relentless hum, in her pristine, minimalist office, Sloane stood alone at the massive window overlooking the sprawling metropolis. A storm was indeed rolling in, dark clouds gathering on the horizon, mirroring the internal turbulence she was experiencing. She didn't mind the coming storm. In fact, she found a strange, almost unsettling comfort in its raw power, its untamed energy. She tapped her tablet, her fingers moving with their usual practiced efficiency, bringing up Gavin's simulation results again. She watched the lines smooth out, the errors vanish, the predictive behavior align across multiple data sets, a beautiful, undeniable pattern emerging from chaos. No formal degree, no prestigious position, no corporate permission sought. And still, he had brought order to her most critical problem. He fixed it, she whispered to herself, the words a revelation, a quiet acknowledgement of a genius she had almost overlooked, a talent that had emerged from the most unexpected of places. But as the days unfolded, a subtle, yet profound, shift began to occur within the Mercer Dynamics ecosystem. It started with a chilling silence. The nods of acknowledgement grew fewer. Conversations that once naturally flowed when Gavin entered a room now stopped abruptly, replaced by polite, forced nods and averted gazes. Slack channels where engineers had once tentatively sought his input on complex coding issues now went quiet, their digital chatter replaced by an eerie, deliberate emptiness. Even Arthur, her longtime CTO, a man whose gruff honesty was usually a constant, seemed to tread more carefully. He was still gruff, still blunt, but the easy camaraderie, the unfiltered conversations they'd once shared, seemed to recede, replaced by a more guarded demeanor. One evening, as Gavin meticulously reviewed code in the quiet solitude of the break room, the fluorescent lights casting long, stark shadows, Arthur sat beside him, placing 2 steaming cups of black coffee on the small, worn table. "You rattled them, Gavin," Arthur stated, his voice flat, matter-of-fact, his gaze steady and knowing. Gavin looked up from his screen, a weary sigh escaping him. "Didn't mean to. I was just doing my job." Arthur took a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes reflecting the flickering lights. "Didn't need to. You just exist. Your presence, your perspective, your quiet competence, it challenges everything they think they know about how this place works. That's the threat, Gavin. Not your skills, but your authenticity. It makes them question their own positions, their own perceived value. Gavin looked down at his hands. The callus is a testament to his real work, his quiet struggle. Feels like I'm being pushed out of a room I never really asked to be in, he murmured, voicing a familiar feeling of displacement. That's because you're not playing their game, Arthur replied, his voice firm, offering a rare moment of encouragement. You're playing life, and life, raw and unpredictable, scares the hell out of people who've never had to survive it, who've always lived in a carefully curated bubble. Gavin looked up, his eyes tired but clear. Am I wasting my time here, Arthur? Fighting this invisible war against their expectations? Arthur clapped him firmly on the back, a gesture of support that felt more genuine than any corporate affirmation. Not if you remember what time's worth, Gavin. Not if you're doing this for more than just a paycheck. Not if you're doing this for Lena. Gavin looked down at Lena's drawing, now creased from being carried in his pocket but never torn, its simple message of support a constant reminder of his purpose. I'm doing it for her, he said, his voice soft but resolute, his priorities clear. Arthur nodded, a slow, knowing gesture. Then you're already winning, son. Just keep showing up. Keep being you. That night at home, the small apartment felt both sanctuary and a cage. Lena sat on the couch, diligently building an elaborate Lego castle, her small fingers moving with practiced precision. The familiar scent of reheated stew wafted from the kitchen, a comforting aroma of normalcy. Did they like your new idea, Daddy? Lena asked, her voice soft, not looking up from her task, her world momentarily contained within the colorful plastic bricks. Some did, Gavin replied, his voice carefully neutral, the corporate politics too complex, too heavy, to burden her young mind with. Some, not so much. They're still figuring out how to process something that doesn't fit their usual models. You told the truth, right? Lena asked, her gaze finally meeting his, her blue eyes holding an unwavering expectation, a child's innate understanding of honesty. I did, sweetheart, Gavin confirmed, his voice gentle, reassuring. Then you did your job. He sat beside her, watching her small fingers move a sky-colored Lego piece into place, a perfect fit, a moment of effortless creation. What if people don't like me for doing the right thing? He mused aloud, voicing a vulnerability he rarely showed, a fear that lingered from past experiences of rejection. Then you look for people who do, Lena said, her answer simple, profound, utterly devoid of complexity, yet carrying a wisdom far beyond her 6 years. You find your tribe. He kissed her forehead, a rush of love washing over him, a profound gratitude for her unwavering presence. You ever think about running this company one day, Lena? He asked, a whimsical, hopeful thought. Only if it comes with free popsicles, she replied immediately, a mischievous glint in her eyes. I'll write it into the contract, Gavin promised, and they both laughed, a shared, unburdened sound that filled the small apartment with a warmth that transcended its physical limitations. And in that soft, ordinary, imperfect moment, Gavin remembered exactly why he had started this journey, why he had dared to step into that boardroom. Not to be accepted, not to prove himself to the corporate titans who had once dismissed him, but to create a world where his daughter, and all the unconventional people like them, wouldn't have to fight to be seen, to be valued, to simply be. Meanwhile, Sloan Mercer's world continued its relentless, high-stakes trajectory. The Investor Summit had been a resounding success, Gavin's presentation a revelation, and his subsequent integration into the company's technical advisory team a carefully managed, yet undeniably impactful, shift. Yet, despite the accolades, the stock surges, and the renewed sense of purpose within Mercer Dynamics, a subtle dissonance began to hum beneath the surface of Sloan's meticulously ordered existence. Gavin's absence, once a matter of course, now felt like a conspicuous void. The empty seat in the back corner of the lab, once an insignificant detail, now seemed to mock her with its emptiness. His name, quietly removed from the internal Slack channels, felt like a deliberate erasure, a suppression of a truth she was beginning to embrace. The AI models, once smoothed into perfection by his intervention, had started to drift again, subtly at first, then more noticeably, their predictive accuracy faltering, their responses becoming erratic. Just a little, just enough to raise alarms, to remind everyone of the gap his departure had created. And yet, amidst the rising concern over the system's performance, no one mentioned his name. No one dared to articulate the obvious solution, the missing piece, except her, in the quiet solitude of her own thoughts. One evening, back in her office, the city lights twinkling like distant, in different stars outside her window. She stared at her desk. It was pristine, perfect, meticulously organized, as always, reflecting her unwavering demand for order, for control. Except for one small detail, a faint brown stain near the edge, barely noticeable unless the light hit it just right, a ghost of a mark on the polished surface. It had been a coffee spill, Gavin's first meeting in her office, a moment of genuine human imperfection amidst the sterile perfection. He'd set down his thermos and apologized instantly, his face etched with genuine contrition. "Sorry," he had mumbled, his voice rough but kind. "This thing leaks hope and caffeine in equal measure." She hadn't laughed then, her professional mask firmly in place. But now, in the profound silence of her office, she found herself strangely unwilling for the stain to be wiped away. It was a tangible link, a small, imperfect memory of a raw, honest moment, a moment where the polished CEO had briefly glimpsed the real man. She stayed late, long after everyone else had gone home, the vast, silent building around her amplifying her isolation. She wandered the deserted halls, her heels clicking softly on the marble floors, an unfamiliar sound in the oppressive quiet, like a woman adrift in someone else's life, searching for a misplaced truth. In the hallway near the sublevel, she passed the break room, its lights dimmed, chairs stacked, a utilitarian space now imbued with a strange melancholy, a testament to the lives lived in the shadows of corporate grandeur. On a small corkboard by the door, pinned among old, faded flyers and terse shift reminders, was a tiny envelope. Her name, "To Miss Mercer," was written in uneven, earnest purple crayon, a child's uncertain hand, a testament to Lena's unwavering belief in her father and perhaps in the magic of connection. She stared at it for several seconds, a sudden tightness in her chest, unsure whether to smile at its innocent sincerity or to break at its poignant, unspoken message. She took the envelope gently, carefully, like it might vanish if touched too quickly, its fragile paper a stark contrast to the hard, cold reality of her world. Inside was a folded piece of paper with stars drawn in every corner, childlike and whimsical, a universe of hope. In the center, in a child's careful, painstakingly formed handwriting, were only a few lines. "Thank you for believing in my dad. He used to smile when he talked about you. Now he doesn't smile much, but I still do. Lena, age 6 3/4. Sloane sank onto the hard bench beside the silent vending machine, the cold plastic a stark reality, a reminder of the world's indifference. For the first time in months, perhaps even years, she took off her gleaming, custom-made heels, her tired feet gratefully meeting the cool floor. She folded her long legs underneath her, almost like a child, curling into herself, and she cried. Not the controlled, silent tears of a CEO in private, but deep, uninhibited sobs that racked her body, a cathartic release of a grief she hadn't realized she was carrying, a profound loneliness finally finding its voice. Lena's words, so simple, so innocent, had pierced through every defense, every layer of corporate armor, revealing a raw, aching truth about the cost of her success, the price of her detached ambition, Gavin's absence, and Lena's heartbroken observation of it. "He doesn't smile much anymore, but I still do," had opened a floodgate she never knew existed, a dam of suppressed emotion finally breaking. She didn't tell anyone where she was going the next morning. No driver, no bodyguard, no meticulously planned itinerary. Just a black coat, a scarf wrapped tightly around her face, attempting to obscure her recognizable features, and Lena's letter, folded carefully in her pocket, a compass guiding her to an unfamiliar truth, an unexpected destination. She found Gavin's apartment after 20 minutes of circling a neighborhood that hadn't seen a new coat of paint in years, a stark contrast to the gleaming towers she inhabited. The worn wooden steps leading up to the building creaked ominously with her weight. The elevator didn't work, stuck on some forgotten floor, a metaphor for the stalled progress in many lives. The hallway smelled of old curry, stale cooking, and the pervasive dampness of rainwater seeping in through unseen cracks. It was a world utterly alien to her, yet imbued with a raw, undeniable authenticity that was both disarming and strangely compelling. When she knocked, a tentative tap on the worn, painted wood, it was Lena who opened the door. The little girl, in a glittery unicorn t-shirt and mismatched socks, her curls held back by a bright paperclip, beamed as if Sloane were an old, cherished friend, not the intimidating CEO from her father's work. "You're the lady from work," Lena exclaimed matter-of-factly, her eyes wide with recognition, a slight suspicion in her voice. "The one who makes Daddy nervous." Sloane blinked, a flash of mortification, followed by a wry, almost self-deprecating smile, a rare show of amusement. "I probably," she began, her voice softer than Lena had ever heard it. "Do you want to come in?" Lena asked, gesturing with a small, unburdened hand towards the cluttered living space. "We don't have guest chairs, but we have floor. You can sit on the floor." Inside, the apartment was small, lived in, and cluttered with toys and folded laundry piled on a worn armchair. A stack of engineering books, old and dog-eared, leaned sideways on the kitchen counter, a silent testament to a hidden life, a forgotten passion. A battered laptop blinked softly on the coffee table, its screen a dull glow, awaiting attention. "Daddy's out looking for jobs," Lena announced, her voice tinged with a child's quiet worry, her small shoulders slumping slightly. "He doesn't think he'll find one, but I told him the sun doesn't ask permission to rise. It just does." "Did you get that from a cartoon?" Sloane asked softly, a genuine curiosity in her voice, charmed by the little girl's profound perspective. "No," Lena replied, her chin held high, her blue eyes holding a deep understanding. "From Daddy. He says big ideas are like that. They just happen, even if no one's ready for them, even if they seem impossible at first." Lena pulled out a box of mismatched Legos, their colors a vibrant splash against the worn carpet, and pointed to the floor. "You can build with me," she offered, her voice earnest. "I only let people I trust help with the roof." Sloane hesitated, a flicker of her old corporate self resisting the intimacy, the sheer domesticity of the moment. But then she looked at Lena's open, trusting face, at the genuine warmth in her eyes, and the decision was made. She lowered herself onto the bean bag, surprisingly comfortable for something that looked like it had survived a vigorous pillow war. Her eyes scanned the room shelves packed with well-loved children's books, a robot ingeniously made of soda cans and wires, a cardboard box labeled "Important Inventions" in crayon. But it was the wall by the window that truly stopped her breath, a collage of photos, a vibrant, messy tapestry of a life lived with love, with resilience. Lena and Gavin at the park, their faces beaming, holding science fair trophies, celebrating birthdays. And in the very center, a photograph of a woman. Kind eyes, a soft, radiant smile, the same wild curls as Lena. "That's Mommy," Lena said quietly, as if sensing Sloane's gaze, her voice tinged with a child's matter-of-fact acceptance of loss, a quiet reverence for the memory. "She died when I was 3, but Daddy still talks to her sometimes when he thinks I'm sleeping. He tells her about the sky and the new codes he's thinking of." Sloane's voice caught in her throat, a lump of emotion rising. "She looks gentle." She was, Lena confirmed, her voice filled with a profound, simple truth. "Daddy said she loved 3 things: rainstorms, old poetry, and the way he made scrambled eggs." "That's a good list, isn't it?" "It's a beautiful list," Sloane managed, a faint smile touching her lips, imagining this gentle woman, a life cut short, yet leaving behind such profound love and legacy. "He stopped making eggs when she died," Lena said matter-of-factly, her voice holding no self-pity, only a child's unwavering logic. "But he started making robots and games and bedtime stories with maps in them. He said he had to build new things to keep her memory alive, to keep her close." Sloane blinked back, the lump rising in her throat, a profound insight washing over her, a realization of Gavin's quiet strength, his deep well of love. He said, "When someone's heart breaks, you either let it stay broken, or you build something beautiful from the pieces." "He really said that?" Sloane asked, her voice barely a whisper, utterly captivated by this man, by this family, by this messy, beautiful, resilient life. "Yep," Lena replied, popping a Lego block into place with unwavering certainty. "Right after we accidentally set the toaster on fire. It was a very emotional morning," Daddy said, "but it ended with a lot of hugs." Sloane smiled, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her heart aching with a strange mix of sorrow for what was lost and profound admiration for what had been built from the fragments. "Lena," she asked gently, her voice soft, hesitant, a tremor of emotion running through it, "do you know why your dad left the company? Why he became a janitor instead of staying at MIT?" Lena looked up at her, her small face imbued with more gravity than any 6-year-old should carry. Her blue eyes, so like her father's, held a deep understanding, a clarity that belied her age. "He thought he made people uncomfortable," she said, her voice quiet but firm, her words landing like perfectly aimed arrows. "That people didn't want a janitor who was smart, that they'd never see the difference between being out of place and being brilliant. He always says, sometimes people get scared when the wrong person turns out to be right, Miss Sloane." The words struck Sloane like shards of glass, clear, sharp, and impossible to ignore. echoing the very fears Gavin had voiced in their first conversation, the silent assumptions he carried. He had left, not out of weakness, not out of defeat, but out of a painful, accurate understanding of their prejudice, their inability to see beyond the uniform. "You talk like someone twice your age," Sloane said, her voice thick with emotion, a profound appreciation for the wisdom she was witnessing. "That's 'cause I borrow Daddy's heart sometimes," Lena replied, a faint, sad smile gracing her lips. "He's got an extra big one, but it gets tired. Sometimes he needs to know people see it too, not just me." The room went quiet, filled with the profound weight of a child's unwavering love and a father's quiet burden, a burden he carried with such quiet dignity. Sloane reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped box, its contents a secret offering, a gesture of acknowledgement. "Can I give you something, Lena?" Lena nodded eagerly, her eyes wide with anticipation. Inside was a tiny USB drive, its surface gleaming, a purple ribbon tied around it like a mark of distinction. "It's a game," Sloane said, her voice softer than Lena had ever heard it, imbued with a rare tenderness. "Your dad helped design the core mechanic. It's not public yet. I thought you might be the first to test it." Lena's eyes lit up, shining with pure delight, a cascade of pure joy. "Does it have dragons?" "Kind of," Sloane replied, a genuine smile finally gracing her lips, chasing away the last shadows of her corporate mask. "It has dragons that don't know they're dragons. They think they're pigeons until they try to fly too far and discover they breathe fire." Lena's mouth formed a perfect O of wonder. "That's awesome." She clutched the box to her chest like it was a treasure map, a magical artifact holding untold potential. "Miss Sloane?" "Yes?" "If you make Daddy smile again," Lena said, her voice small but resolute, her gaze unwavering, "I'll forgive you for making him nervous." The words landed with a gentle finality, like a verdict that had been decided by a jury of one, a child's pure, uncompromising demand for happiness, for a father's lost smile. Sloane didn't speak. She couldn't. Her carefully constructed composure finally crumbled, replaced by a raw, profound emotion. Instead, she nodded, a solemn, quiet promise, sealed with a silent tear. As she walked back down the worn hallway, the air felt different, less like a sterile corporate corridor, more like a path opening towards something unknown, something true. Sloane looked up at the overcast sky, feeling the familiar weight of the world, the pressure of expectations, pressing against her shoulders. But for the first time, she didn't mind. She carried Lena's trust, a precious, fragile burden, a new compass in her life. Rain was falling in sheets the morning Mayline Ward called the press conference. It wasn't soft, forgiving rain, not a gentle drizzle meant to symbolize cleansing or a new beginning. This was a full-throated storm, a relentless, unforgiving downpour, the kind that drove people indoors, urging them to seek shelter unless they possessed something truly profound, something worth standing in the cold, unyielding deluge for. The sky above the Ward Hale room, the symbol of her newfound purpose and a testament to her transformed priorities, was a bruised, uniform grey, mirroring the tempest that had engulfed her corporate world and threatened to drown her carefully constructed life. Mayline stood at the podium in front of the Ward Hale room, directly facing the onslaught of the storm and the relentless, predatory gaze of the assembled media. Her blonde hair, usually meticulously styled into a severe, corporate bun, was pulled back tightly in a simple ponytail, already glistening with rain, a few stray strands escaping to frame her face, swept by the wind that whipped through the open doors. There was no makeup, no designer coat, just a plain grey sweater and rain-slicked jeans of stark, raw authenticity that stripped away all pretense of her former corporate persona, revealing the woman beneath the impenetrable armor. Her presentation was unadorned, her voice stripped of its usual calculated modulation. Cameras, their lenses wide and hungry, pointed at her like cannons, their flashes popping erratically through the rain-streaked air, capturing every raw emotion, every subtle tremor. Microphones, bristling with furry wind covers, stood at attention like soldiers, ready to capture every syllable, every breath, every confession. But Lucas, watching from the sidelines with Eva and Becca, huddled under a small, inadequate awning, saw something different. He saw not a CEO under siege, but a mother, a warrior, a woman finally stepping into her truth, not to defend herself against accusations, but to invite others in, to share a piece of her profound transformation, her hard-won wisdom. He saw a woman who had finally learned to lead not by command, but by example, by vulnerability. Mayline gripped the edges of the podium, her knuckles wide against the dark, polished wood, her breath misting in the cold, damp air, a visible cloud of testament to her inner state. Her gaze swept over the sea of faces, the eager journalists, the skeptical investors, the few who looked genuinely curious, perhaps even hopeful. "I've been asked," she began, her voice steady despite the visible tremor in her hands, her words cutting through the incessant patter of the rain, "by my board, by my PR team, by my investors, to explain myself, to justify my actions, to account for my deviation from the expected path." Click, flash. Murmurs rippled through the assembled reporters, a low, expectant hum of anticipation. She went on, her voice gaining strength, imbued with a quiet, unwavering power that seemed to command the very elements. "To explain why I allowed my daughter to be seen in public. Why I let a man without a medical license, without a corporate background, become her closest confidant, her guide. Why I, the CEO of a billion-dollar company, a woman who built her empire on logic and data, would kneel on the floor and paint stars on a wall with a child." She paused, her gaze narrowing, scanning the crowd, challenging their narrow definitions of what was acceptable, what was professional, what constituted success. "I could give you a statement," she continued, her voice hardening slightly, imbued with a fierce, quiet defiance. "A meticulously crafted narrative designed to control public perception, to mitigate damage, to protect the brand. But I won't." A hush fell over the crowd, the rain seeming to intensify the silence, making every word resonate with profound impact, a stark departure from her usual carefully curated pronouncements. "Because I'm not here to explain myself," she declared, her voice clear, resonant, imbued with a profound sincerity. "I'm here to remember who I forgot to be, and to remind you all, perhaps, what truly matters." Her eyes, though red-rimmed from sleepless nights and emotional strain, held a newfound clarity, a light that seemed to emanate from within. "I forgot what it meant to slow down," she continued, her voice filled with a raw, unflinching honesty that cut through the professional cynicism of the press corps like a beam of sunlight through the storm clouds. "To truly see my child, not as a patient or a problem to be solved, but as a person. Brilliant, unique, worthy of a love that didn't demand she change to fit my world, that didn't judge her for her differences." She gestured behind her, toward the glass doors of the Ward Hale room, through which the vibrant colors of children's art could be glimpsed, a beacon of creativity and freedom against the gray storm. "And I forgot what love looks like when it doesn't need to be polished or perfect, when it's messy and real and unconditional. I forgot what it means to be present, truly present, with the people who matter most." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the faces of the reporters, the investors, the company executives, each one a reflection of the world she had dominated. "And that man you all wrote about," her voice softened, a profound tenderness entering her tone, a public declaration of affection, "the janitor." She paused, her gaze meeting Lucas's across the rain-soaked space, their eyes locking for a fraction of a second, a silent communion that spoke volumes. "He taught me how to listen, how to kneel, how to meet my daughter where she is, not where I hoped she'd be. He taught me the true meaning of presence, of empathy, of seeing the person beyond the label." Her voice trembled slightly, a raw emotion that seemed to resonate with everyone in the room. "He reminded me that brilliance doesn't always come with a title, that kindness can be a terrifyingly powerful force in a world that thrives on ruthless competition. He reminded me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply be there, to offer a steady hand, a quiet presence, a shared moment of understanding." She took a deep breath, the rain plastering stray strands of hair to her cheeks, her resolve hardening with each passing second. "And if standing beside him, if embracing this truth, cost me everything I built from the top floor up, my reputation, my position, my carefully crafted image, then maybe," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction, "it's time I remembered that the foundation matters more than the penthouse, that the people who truly matter are the ones who see you, not for what you project, but for who you truly are." The reporters, usually so eager to interrupt, to pounce on any perceived weakness, were silenced. They were captivated, not by her power, but by her vulnerability, her profound honesty. Then, a single reporter, a woman in a red blazer whose sharp questions had often unnerved Sloane in the past, slowly raised her hand, her usual aggressive demeanor softened, replaced by a hesitant curiosity. "Miss Ward," she began, her voice clear, respectful, "are you stepping down? Are you prepared to sacrifice your entire career for this unconventional path?" Maylan shook her head, her gaze firm, unwavering, her stance resolute. "No," she declared, her voice ringing with a newfound clarity, a power that transcended corporate authority. I'm stepping up. Not as CEO of Mercer Dynamics, but as Eva's mother. As a woman who finally understands that leadership isn't about being followed or dominating. It's about making space for others to walk beside you, to empower them, to nurture their unique gifts, to connect on a human level. She gestured back towards the Ward Hale room, its doors now open, its interior glowing with the vibrant colors of children's art, a beacon of hope. And that man you all wrote about, the janitor, her voice softened, a profound tenderness entering her tone, a public declaration of affection. Gavin Brooks. He taught me how to listen, how to kneel, how to see the world through my daughter's eyes, and in doing so, see myself anew. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the faces of the assembled press, the investors, the company executives, each one a reflection of the world she had once dominated, a world she was now choosing to redefine. He reminded me that brilliance doesn't always come with a title, that kindness can be a terrifyingly powerful force, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply be there, to offer a steady hand, a quiet presence, a shared moment of understanding. She met Lucas's eyes across the rain-soaked space, their gazes locking in a silent communion that spoke volumes, a profound acknowledgement of their shared journey. And if standing beside him, if embracing this truth, cost me everything I built from the top floor up, my reputation, my position, my carefully crafted image, then maybe, she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. It's time I remembered that the foundation matters more than the penthouse. That the people who truly matter are the ones who see you, not for what you project, but for who you truly are. He taught me that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in control, but in connection. The reporters, usually so eager to interrupt, to pounce on any perceived weakness, any hint of scandal, were utterly silenced. They were captivated, not by her power, but by her vulnerability, her profound honesty, her radical departure from the corporate script. Then, a single reporter, a woman in a red blazer whose sharp questions had often unnerved Sloane in the past, slowly raised her hand. Her usual aggressive demeanor softened, replaced by a hesitant curiosity. "Miss Ward," she began, her voice clear, respectful. "Are you stepping down? Are you prepared to sacrifice your entire career for this unconventional path?" Mayline shook her head, her gaze firm, unwavering, her stance resolute, a quiet strength emanating from her. "No," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "I'm stepping up. Not as CEO of Mercer Dynamics, but as Eva's mother. As a woman who finally understands that leadership isn't about being followed or dominating. It's about making space for others to walk beside you, to empower them, to nurture their unique gifts, to connect on a human level. It's about showing up, not just for the success, but for the struggle too." She gestured back towards the Ward Hale room, its doors now open, its interior glowing with the vibrant colors of children's art, a beacon of hope and healing. "And that man you all wrote about, the janitor," her voice softened, a profound tenderness entering her tone, a public declaration of affection. "Gavin Brooks. He taught me how to listen, how to kneel, how to see the world through my daughter's eyes, and in doing so, see myself anew. He reminded me that brilliance doesn't always come with a title, that kindness can be a terrifyingly powerful force, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply be there, to offer a steady hand, a quiet presence, a shared moment of understanding." She met Lucas's eyes across the rain-soaked space, their gazes locking in a silent communion that spoke volumes, a profound acknowledgement of their shared journey, their shared belief. "He taught me that true strength lies not in control, but in connection, and that the best solutions, the most enduring innovations, come not from the boardroom, but from the heart." 6 months later, the Ward Hale room pulsed with life, a vibrant, joyful hum that resonated through its brightly painted walls and open, inviting spaces. The grand reopening, less a formal ribbon-cutting ceremony and more a celebration of a new philosophy, had attracted local schools, eager therapists, and families from across the state, all drawn by the inspiring story of Mayline Ward's transformation and the unique, child-centered approach of the center. But it wasn't the festive banners or the colorful balloons that made the day truly special. It was the palpable hum of something deeper, something profoundly human, belonging. Every corner of the building, once a forgotten storage space, now breathed with intention and warmth, a testament to the power of a shared vision, a testament to the quiet, persistent strength of ordinary people. In the central room, a vast, airy space filled with natural light that streamed through the newly installed skylights. A circle of children sat barefoot on the polished wooden floor, their laughter and murmurs weaving a gentle tapestry of sound. They drew with chunky pastels on butcher paper spread across the floor, their small hands moving freely, uninhibited, their imaginations unfettered. No one asked them to sit straight. No one corrected how they held their crayons, how they expressed themselves. Each line was its own language, a direct, unfiltered expression from the heart, and no one was forced to translate. No one was judged for their unique form of communication. It was a symphony of self-expression, a quiet revolution of acceptance, a testament to the power of creating spaces where every child could feel seen, heard, and valued. At the front of the room, Lucas knelt beside a boy with bright, curious eyes, who was tapping his pencil rhythmically on the floor, a soft, repetitive beat that communicated his inner world. "You feel it in beats, huh?" Lucas said with a gentle smile, his voice low and understanding, a testament to his ability to connect on a child's terms. "Okay, let's make a drum line out of colors. What color is your favorite beat?" The boy's face lit up, a spark of understanding passing between them, a recognition of his unique rhythm being valued, celebrated. Across the room, Eva floated between stations like a quiet breeze, her movements graceful and confident, a stark contrast to the coiled anxiety that had once defined her. Her signature blue was still present, a comforting constant woven into her shirt, her shoelaces, a subtle nod to her journey, her anchor in the world. But now, integrated effortlessly into her attire and her spontaneous bursts of art, were oranges, lilacs, even deep reds of vibrant rainbow stitched from courage, self-discovery, and newfound joy. And she spoke, not constantly, not with the incessant chatter of other children, but clearly, her voice gaining strength and nuance with each passing day. Today, she was giving a tour to 3 new kids, her small hand gesturing proudly, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. She pointed to the cozy reading nook, then to the textured wall filled with various sensory panels, each designed to engage different tactile needs. "This one's like clouds," she whispered, her voice soft and inviting, letting them feel the soft cotton, the rough burlap, the smooth polished stone, her face alight with the joy of sharing her world, of guiding others into the safe space she had helped create, a space where they too could find their voice, their colors. Mayline watched from the glass door, her heart full, tears blurring her vision slightly. They weren't tears of sadness, but of profound gratitude, of overwhelming pride, of a quiet understanding that had taken root and blossomed in the most unexpected soil. She turned as a news anchor approached, a cameraman in tow, their faces expectant, eager for a soundbite from the CEO-turned-philanthropist, the woman who had defied convention and found a new purpose. "Miss Ward, ready for your interview?" The anchor's voice was bright, professional, honed for media events, for crafting narratives. Mayline smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that reached her eyes, chasing away the last shadows of her past self, but shook her head. "No interviews today." "But it's the grand reopening," the anchor protested, clearly disappointed, the opportunity for a high-profile story, a chance to capture the moment, slipping away. "I know," she said softly, her gaze sweeping over the bustling room, filled with happy children and engaged parents, their collective energy a testament to the center's success. "That's why I want the focus to be on them, the kids, not me. This is their space, their story." She turned and walked back into the room, leaving a bewildered news crew in her wake, a subtle defiance of corporate expectations, a quiet reclaiming of her narrative. She found Lucas showing Becca and Eva how to fold intricate paper stars, their heads bent in shared concentration, their small hands working in gentle unison. "I think you just stunned the press," Lucas whispered as she approached, a teasing glint in his eye, a shared amusement at her quiet rebellion against the media machine. "I'm learning to let silence speak," Mayline replied, a quiet wisdom in her voice, a profound lesson learned from the children, from Gavin, from her own hard-won journey. "Thanks to both of you," Becca grinned, her own star-folding technique improving with each attempt. She used to talk in PowerPoints, she declared, her voice full of innocent observation. Now she talks in hugs, and sometimes in quiet smiles. Lucas chuckled, a warm, resonant sound. "Growth," he affirmed, his eyes twinkling with pride. Then he looked at Eva, who had just finished folding her star, its points sharp and precise, a small, tangible representation of her journey. She handed it to him, her small gesture imbued with deep meaning, her voice clear and strong, a sound that still brought a lump to his throat. "For Blue," she said simply. Lucas blinked back tears, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll keep it forever, Bluebird." Becca chimed in, holding up her own star, a vibrant yellow. "I made one, too, but mine's for yellow. For hope." Mayline took a breath, knelt down beside them, and folded her own paper star. Her movement surprisingly deft, her color choice a deep, courageous red. She handed it to Eva. Mine's red, for bravery. Like yours. Eva placed all 3 stars together in her palm, a small, tangible constellation of their shared journey, their interwoven lives. Family, she said, her voice soft but firm, a profound declaration that echoed through the room, a quiet truth that resonated in the hearts of all who heard it. No one spoke for a moment, not out of awkwardness, but reverence, a profound respect for the simple, powerful truth Eva had just articulated. Then, from across the room, a soft bell rang, signaling the transition to the next activity. It was time. The ribbon-cutting ceremony had been scheduled, but Lucas had insisted it not be formal, a decision rooted in his philosophy of embracing childhood spontaneity. Let the kids cut it, he'd said, his vision for the center embracing every aspect of their lived experience. They built this. Their hand, their hearts, their ideas shaped this place. So now, standing proudly beside the vibrant rainbow mural at the front entrance, Eva and Becca held a large pair of oversized scissors together, their small hands guided by a shared purpose. The ribbon wasn't corporate blue or a sterile white. It was every color they'd ever used, a vibrant tapestry of shared experiences, blooming creativity, and courageous self-expression. Before they cut it, Eva, with a quiet strength that emanated from her small frame, turned to the gathered crowd, her blue eyes scanning the faces before her. Without prompting, without a single cue, she cleared her throat. "My name is Eva," she said, her voice clear, strong, and filled with a newfound confidence. "I like colors. I like stars. And this place," she continued, her gaze sweeping across the room, embracing everyone within it, "is for anyone who ever felt like a puzzle piece in the wrong box." Silence. A profound, respectful silence descended upon the room, broken only by the soft whir of cameras and the distant hum of the city. Then applause broke like thunder, a wave of heartfelt emotion washing over the room, a cathartic release of shared understanding. Tears flowed freely, smiles bloomed on countless faces, parents hugged their children silently, a shared understanding rippling through the crowd, a testament to the powerful impact of Eva's simple, honest words. The ribbon fell, a symbolic release, a barrier dismantled, and the Ward Hale room officially opened. Not as a building, but as a movement. Not as a center, but as a beginning. That evening, as the stars began to pepper the darkening sky, the city lights twinkling like scattered diamonds below, the 4 of them, Gavin, Sloane, Lena, and the quiet, radiant Eva, shared dinner on the rooftop of the building, a place of shared dreams and new beginnings. Pizza, sodas, mismatched paper plates, a simple, perfectly imperfect feast against the breathtaking backdrop of the urban landscape. Becca, her small frame leaning into Gavin's side, her gaze sweeping across the city, asked, "Do you think we'll always live near here?" Lucas glanced at Mayline, a silent question passing between them, a shared understanding of their interconnected destinies. She nodded, a soft, contented smile on her face, her hand resting gently on his. "I think we'll always belong here. Our roots are here now, Gavin, our home." Eva nestled against Gavin's other side, her small head resting on his shoulder, her voice a soft, contented whisper, echoed their shared sentiment. "Home," she said, the single word encompassing everything: safety, love, belonging. Gavin kissed the top of her head, his heart overflowing. "That's right, Bluebird." Mayline looked at the 3 of them, a tableau of love, of connection, of a family forged not by biology alone, but by shared experience, by mutual understanding, by a profound, unwavering commitment. The wind picked up gently, rustling her hair, carrying a folded paper star, one of Eva's creations, a vibrant mix of blue and yellow across the rooftop. She chased it, caught it, held it gently in her palm, a tangible symbol of their journey. "I never knew love could be this quiet," she whispered almost to herself, her voice thick with emotion, "and still say everything." Lucas stood beside her, his presence a steady, comforting anchor. "You know what the best part of this whole journey is?" he asked, his voice low and warm, reflecting the golden light of the fading day. "What?" she asked, turning to him, her eyes searching his, filled with a profound gratitude that words couldn't fully express. "I came into your world thinking I had to teach you how to kneel, how to find stillness, how to embrace vulnerability." He looked at her, his gaze filled with a deep, unwavering affection. "But somewhere along the way," he continued, his voice soft, "you learned how to stay. You learned how to root, how to be present, how to truly connect. You taught me that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in control, but in connection. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes, tears of understanding, of release, of a love that had finally found its home. You didn't fix my daughter, Gavin. You didn't fix me. You reminded us we were never broken. You just needed a place without labels and people who refused to leave. He smiled, his eyes glistening, a profound realization dawning. And sometimes, he whispered, his gaze meeting hers, the most beautiful things are built from the pieces we thought were beyond repair. As the last light of day faded from the sky, casting long, purple shadows over the city, Eva's voice, clear and strong, carried on the gentle breeze. Tomorrow, she announced, her voice full of innocent wonder, let's paint the sky. Lucas and Mayline looked at each other, their smiles widening, a shared vision, a future unfolding in every vibrant hue, a promise of endless possibility. Yes, Mayline whispered, her voice soft and true, a promise sealed with a kiss. Let's. Their story, born from a chance encounter and a shared moment of insight, had blossomed into a testament to the enduring power of human connection, a reminder that even in the most unexpected places, love, hope, and belonging can always be found, if only we have the courage to look, to listen, and to stay. If this story has touched your heart, even just a little, if it reminded you that love doesn't need to be loud to be powerful, that genuine connections can change lives, then we would love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Leave your city, your country, or even just a heart emoji in the comments. We read every message, and we truly want to know how far our stories are reaching. And if this story has given you hope, if it reminded you that kindness can rewrite destiny, that understanding can heal even the deepest wounds, please don't keep it to yourself. Share it, send it to someone who might need it, so they too can feel seen, heard, and cared for. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please press the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any story that might change your day or your heart. Every subscription, every view, every share helps us continue bringing these meaningful stories to life. Thank you. Truly, thank you so much for giving us this precious moment of your time. We are deeply honored that you are here, walking this journey with us.